Chapter 1596, The Betrayal. Chapter 1596, The Betrayal. Author's note. Unedited. Chapter The woman's gown was made of a silky, almost iridescent fabric that caught the light with every movement, creating a mesmerizing effect. Silver patterns, resembling constellations, were woven into the fabric, giving her an almost celestial appearance. Around her neck hung a pendant with a deep blue sapphire, its depth matching the intensity of her gaze. Gustav's eyes narrowed as he regarded them coldly. "What do you want?" he asked with an icy tone. The man spoke first. "Gustav, we've come to discuss the offer to join us as a world leader. Your influence and power could help stabilize the current unrest." Gustav crossed his arms, his gaze unwavering. "I've already made it clear that I'm not interested in a position I can't commit to. I won't be around to serve properly." The female world leader stepped forward. "The world is on the brink of chaos, Gustav. Your presence could bring the order we desperately need." Gustav's patience was wearing thin. "I don't care about your politics or your power struggles. If that's all you came to say, you can leave the way you came." The leaders exchanged glances, clearly not willing to give up so easily. "Please, Gustav," the woman pleaded, "consider the impact you could have. A lot of people now look up to you. They trust you." Gustav smirked as a dangerous glint appeared in his eye. "I have a proposition for you. It's the only one you'll be getting from me. If you don't agree to it, we have nothing more to talk about." The leaders looked intrigued, though wary. "What is this proposition?" the man asked. "You'll hear about it at the press meeting," Gustav replied, his tone final. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other matters to attend to." Without waiting for a response, Gustav turned and headed toward the entrance of the skyscraper. The leaders followed at a distance, clearly unsettled by his abrupt dismissal. As he approached the ground floor, the noise from outside grew louder. The press and media were still gathered in droves. Their cameras and microphones were ready to capture any statement he made. Gustav stepped outside as the cool evening air a sharp breezed by and the surroundings were filled with the clamor of the reporters. The moment he appeared, the crowd erupted with questions. "Gustav, are you considering the offer to become a world leader? What's your response to the current global unrest? Can you give us any insight into your future plans?" Gustav raised a hand, signaling for silence. The reporters quieted, their eyes trained on him, eager for his words. "I understand there's a lot of speculation about my role in the future," Gustav began, his voice steady and commanding. "I have no interest in becoming a world leader. I cannot serve in a position that requires my constant presence when I have other responsibilities." The crowd murmured, but Gustav continued. "However, I do have a proposition for the current world leaders, one that I believe could address the issues we're facing more effectively than a simple title change." The cameras zoomed in, capturing every word. The two leaders who had approached him earlier watched from the side, their expressions tense. "What is this proposition?" a reporter asked, his voice cutting through the murmur. Gustav's eyes scanned the crowd, his gaze intense. "I propose the creation of an independent council composed of the most capable and trustworthy individuals from various fields: science, medicine, defense, and yes, law enforcement. This council would work together to address global issues, free from political agendas and corruption. They will have the power to sanction the world government and any other authoritative agencies all across the world for any wrong actions." The reporters were stunned into silence for a moment before the questions began to fly. Who would be on this council? How would they be selected? Would you lead this council, Gustav? Gustav raised his hand again, quieting them. The council members would be selected based on their expertise and integrity. They would be individuals who have proven themselves through their actions, not their words. I won't necessarily claim leadership of the council, however. I will work together with the members, and the council will directly answer to me. They will carry on with their duties, even when I am not present on Earth. The male world leader from earlier stepped forward, his voice carrying authority. And how do you propose we go about establishing this council? Gustav looked at him with a faint smirk. That's for the people to decide. I've given you the idea. If you truly care about stabilizing the world, you'll find a way to make it happen. After the world leaders agree to this, the people will decide on their candidates. Is this your answer? Gustav crimsoned. There was a tense silence as the leaders processed his words. The female leader finally spoke with a thoughtful gaze. It's a bold idea, Gustav. One that could indeed make a difference. Gustav nodded. Bold actions are needed in bold times. If you agree to this, I'll lend my support and help where I can. But if you continue to play politics, you'll find no ally in me. The crowd buzzed with renewed energy as the implications of Gustav's proposition sunk in. The two leaders present conferred quietly for a moment before nodding in agreement. Well, consider it, Gustav, the man said finally. Thank you for your time. Gustav nodded, turning back to the press. That's all for now. I have preparations to make. With that, he stepped back into the skyscraper as the doors slid shut behind him. Endrik was waiting for him in the living room, a curious look on his face. What happened out there? Gustav shrugged, sitting down beside him. I propose the creation of an independent council to address global issues. This independent council will be above the world leaders and every authority on Earth. Now, let's see if they have the guts to follow through. Endrik chuckled, shaking his head. You really gave them a lot to think about. Gustav smirked. I had to do it in front of the press to give them little chances of refusal. The morning after Gustav's public proposal, the world was abuzz with conversation and speculation. News outlets and social media platforms were flooded with discussions about his proposition. Headlines screamed the news from every corner of the globe. Gustav Crimson proposes independent council to oversee government decisions and address global issues. Will world leaders accept Gustav's bold plan? Public support surges for independent council. In every city, people gathered to talk about Gustav's idea. From cafes to markets, the consensus was clear. If the world government truly cared about the people, they would accept Gustav's proposal. The man's got a point, said an elderly gentleman in a popular pub. Politics, as usual, isn't working. Maybe it's time we tried something different. I agree, responded a young woman, sipping her coffee in a New York City diner. Gustav's idea of an independent council makes sense. We need leaders who care more about people than power. The protests, which had already been simmering, gained new momentum. Crowds of demonstrators carried signs that read, "Support the council and listen to Gustav." The pressure on world leaders was mounting, and they knew they had to respond. In government buildings across the globe, high-ranking officials held frantic meetings. The tension was high as they debated the merits and risks of Gustav's proposal. This is unprecedented, said one leader, pounding his fist on the table. We can't just hand over power to a 21-year-old. But look at the state of the world, countered another. If we don't act, we risk losing everything. The people are with him. They trust him. Voices rose and fell in heated arguments. Some leaders were adamantly against the idea, unwilling to relinquish their control. Others, seeing the writing on the wall, argued for change. Think about it, urged a young diplomat. If we show that we're willing to listen to the people and take bold steps, we could regain their trust. This could be the fresh start we need. After 3 days of intense deliberation, the world government made a historic decision. They would accept Gustav's proposal and establish the independent council. The announcement was met with widespread relief and cautious optimism. Gustav was just 2 days away from his planned departure for Argonne when he received the news. He knew he had to postpone his trip to help set up the council. He couldn't just leave it in the hands of anyone. That evening, Gustav addressed the world once more. "Thank you for your support and trust," he began. "We have a unique opportunity to reshape our world, to create a system that truly serves the people. The people will select individuals of integrity and expertise to form this independent council." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Gustav employed the help of E and the others to set up an online platform where people could nominate and vote for candidates. They encouraged everyone to participate, emphasizing the importance of choosing individuals who embodied the values of humanity, compassion, and expertise in their respective fields. Chapter 1597, Forever Young. Chapter 1597, Forever Young, author's note. Unedited, chapter The robed figures hesitated, clearly recognizing E and the threat he posed. "He is one of our god close friends," one of them voiced. "It doesn't matter. Get him." Another one of them shouted in response, and they launched themselves at him with reckless abandon. He didn't move at first. He simply raised his hand, and with a flick of his wrist, a vortexes appeared like rings around all of the attackers. In next instant, the rings closed off and body parts were separated in half. Elevra, her body trembling from exhaustion, managed a small, relieved smile. Asterisk, 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 she whispered, barely able to stand. E turned to her, his expression softening slightly. Asterisk, asterisk, I told Gustav I'd take care of this, and I always keep my word. With a single, graceful motion, E scooped Elevra into his arms, shielding her from any further attacks as he unleashed a final, devastating blast of energy that disintegrated the remaining Gustavo Alliance members. Asterisk, asterisk, let's get you out of here. Asterisk, asterisk, he said softly, and before the enemies could regroup, he stepped back into the shimmering portal, disappearing into the void with Elevra. Back on Earth, Gustav stood with his team, his mind focused on the search for Calden. But somewhere in the back of his mind, he couldn't help but feel a faint sense of relief. E had handled it, and now he could focus on the threat at hand. To be continued. SS Gustav heart pounded with desperation as Angie Blade approached at a speed quicker than he could activate his dimensional bracelet. Lightning Blitz has been activated. As he triggered the lightning blitz, his form dissolved into a streak of lightning, racing away from her. He reappeared over 1,000 miles away in an instant, basking in the change of scenery. Before he could even process his next move, a sharp pain erupted in his chest. Angie's blade, dark and malevolent, had followed him through space and time, stabbing deep into his heart. His eyes widened in disbelief as he looked down at the blade protruding from his chest. Dark, corrosive energy spread rapidly from the point of infiltration, coursing through his veins and seeping into his very being. "No, Angie," he whispered, feeling the life force draining from him. He dropped to the ground with his body convulsing as the dark energy continued to spread, snuffing out the light within him. Angie stood a short distance away, her blade still connected to him through a thin, almost imperceptible thread of darkness. Her eyes were blank, devoid of the warmth and life that had once defined her. In the depths of her mind, a voice whispered, "Good human, you have destroyed the outworldly." Suddenly, Angie's eyes flickered with recognition. The haze clouding her mind began to lift, and she stared in horror at Gustav's lifeless form. Tears welled up in her eyes, streaming down her cheeks as she fell to her knees beside him. "Gustav!" Her voice broke with emotion. The voice in her head persisted, cold and unyielding. "Now, kill yourself as well." Angie clutched her head. "What have I done?" "Kill yourself." She raised the blade towards her neck in the next instant. Meanwhile, in the void of darkness that was now Gustav's consciousness, he floated aimlessly. The system's voice echoed around him. "You have died, Gustav." The darkness from the blade is interfering with your regeneration and reincarnation abilities. Does that mean I can't come back to life? Gustav questioned. If your reincarnation bloodline doesn't kick in, you won't. No, this can't be the end. There must be something that can be done. The system responded, its tone almost apologetic. I do not know of any solution. The dark energy is too powerful. Images from the system's feedback flashed before Gustav, showing Angie kneeling by his corpse, her form racked with sobs. She held the blade to her neck, her resolve faltering as the voice urged her to end her life. No, Angie, don't! Gustav shouted into the void, but his voice reached no ears. He thought of Falco, Endrick, and Ealdris, who were on their way to the Alliance. He thought of all the battles they had fought together, the sacrifices they had made. This couldn't be the end. It couldn't. Angie's tearful eyes met the blade as she prepared to decapitate herself. I'm sorry, Gustav. I'm so sorry. Desperation clawed at Gustav's soul. There has to be a way, he thought, his mind frantically searching for any glimmer of hope. In the midst of his despair, a golden light began to glow in the void. It started as a faint flicker, but grew brighter with each passing moment. Gustav reached out, his fingers brushing against the light. To his surprise, it felt warm and familiar. The ancient hourglass, the system's voice noted with a hint of surprise. The hourglass appeared above Gustav's corpse, its sands shimmering with an ethereal glow. As it turned upside down, the golden sand within began to flow in reverse. Time itself started to rewind. Gustav felt a pull as his consciousness was drawn back to the light. The dark energy receded and the wound in his chest closing as if it had never been there. The blade poised at Angie's neck suddenly froze. Her eyes widened as she watched the events around her unfold in reverse. The golden light enveloped both Gustav and Angie, reversing the damage done by their brutal fight. The buildings they had destroyed reformed, the earth healed, and the very fabric of reality stitched itself back together. The pain and agony that had consumed them both dissipated. Gustav found himself suspended in the vast, timeless void as the universe rewound. Watching events unfold in reverse, he saw Jack's body reassemble, Angie's deadly blade retreat from his heart, and everything gradually resetting. His consciousness floated above it all, detached from the temporal currents. He devised a plan to trap and isolate Angie, ensuring her dark influence would no longer pose a threat. When the universe's timeline reached the point of Angie's initial appearance, Gustav seized the ancient hourglass, stopping the reversal. Time halted, and he re-entered his body. Gustav bolted toward the icy region where Jack and Angie were about to clash. Arriving just in time, he stood between them. Jack, sensing the shift in time and retaining his memories from the other timeline, immediately lunged to strike Angie down. Gustav intercepted him, shouting, "Stop, Jack! There's another way." Jack's expression twisted in confusion and anger. "Gustav, you can't protect her. She's too dangerous." Ignoring Jack's protests, Gustav turned to Angie and embraced her tightly. "I will end your torment," he whispered. Activating assimilation, he began to absorb her body into his own. Angie struggled as the process began. Her black and white form twisted and writhed, trying to escape the pull. "Krua!" she screamed in a tone filled with both rage and agony. The assimilation was excruciating, each second stretching into an eternity. Gustav felt every ounce of her pain, the darkness within her fighting against him. The air around them shimmered with energy, the ground beneath them cracking and heaving under the immense pressure. Jack watched while clenching his fists in frustration. He wanted to intervene, but something in Gustav's resolve held him back. "Gustav, if this goes wrong, I will have no other choice but to end you alongside with her." Gustav gritted his teeth, his voice strained. "You won't have to." The process continued for nearly an hour, the struggle evident on both their faces. Slowly, Angie's dark form began to meld with Gustav's, her features blending into his own. His skin took on a pale hue, and dark tendrils of energy swirled around him. Finally, with a final, agonizing surge of power, Gustav completed the assimilation. His body now bore a mixture of his and Angie's features, a stark contrast of light and dark. He gasped for breath, feeling the surging darkness within him. Without hesitation, Gustav plunged his hand into his chest, gritting his teeth against the searing pain. His fingers wrapped around something solid, and with a fierce tug, he pulled out an entirely human Angie. She emerged from his body, collapsing to the ground, unconscious but free from the dark influence that had consumed her. Gustav, now bearing the full brunt of the darkness, fought to contain it. The black energy roiled within him, threatening to overwhelm his senses. His vision blurred, and he felt himself slipping into unconsciousness. Kill. Destroy. Kill. Destroy. Retrieve the dark angel. Cause catastrophe. Kill the strongest. His mind raced with all sorts of thoughts that sought to consume him. Jack rushed forward, catching Gustav before he hit the ground. Gustav, stay with me, he shouted. Gustav's eyes fluttered open for a moment, his voice barely a whisper. Jack, take care of her. She's free now. I have to put myself to sleep, or the voices will overwhelm me. Help them. With that, Gustav's body went limp, the darkness still churning within him. Jack carefully laid him down beside Angie, both of them unconscious but alive. As the wind held around them, Jack took a deep breath. His thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. This kid, you truly are something else, he muttered. But what did he mean by help them? Jack wondered internally. Inside Gustav's spacecraft, Eldris, Falco, and Endrick were gathered around the central control panel. The ship AI's voice echoed through the cabin, informing them that their journey would take approximately 3 days, after passing through designated wormholes. 3 days, EE said, tapping the console thoughtfully. That gives us enough time to review our plans and ensure we're ready for anything. Eldris nodded, his eyes shimmering with determination. We've gone over it countless times, but we need to be absolutely certain. There's no room for error. Falco leaned back in his seat as dark energy swirled subtly around his fingers. I just hope there won't be any mishaps. Rhea is counting on us. Endrick, sitting slightly apart from the others, felt a gnawing unease that he couldn't shake. He didn't want to alarm the group, so he kept his concerns to himself. As the conversation continued around him, he excused himself quietly and made his way to one of the private spaces in the ship. The room was dimly lit, providing a quiet retreat from the bustling activity outside. Endrick took a deep breath and communicated with Husarius, a glowing green that appeared on his forehead, pulsating gently. Husarius, Endrick called softly, his voice echoing in the small chamber. I need your guidance. The familiar, calming presence of Husarius filled his mind. Endrick, what troubles you? There's something off, Endrick admitted. Chapter 1598, A Fool Indeed. Chapter 1598, A Fool Indeed, Author's Note. Unedited, Chapter Gustav reactivated his golden body form in time, causing a radiant light to envelop him. The hand that had lunged at him burned upon contact, forcing the shadowy hand to shrink away. Gustav's darkened flesh also returned to its natural state, but Gustav could feel the lingering effects of the encounter. What was that thing, he wondered once more. Gustav had destroyed it before, and yet it returned, so he wasn't sure it was gone for good even after getting rid of it again. His instincts proved correct when he was attacked again, this time by multiple shadowy hands emerging from the ground. They moved with eerie coordination, each one trying to latch onto him and spread their corruption. Gustav unleashing a powerful burst of energy that disintegrated the hands. But even as they fell apart, they began to reform, their dark essence refusing to be vanquished. Gustav continuously did his best to escape physical contact with the shadowy hands. Using his atomic disintegration, he managed to temporarily dissipate many of them, but they always reformed, no matter what he did. Acquisition has been activated. Gustav activated acquisition to see if it could be of any help in this situation. Unfortunately, nothing happened. The hands still came at him. Gustav guessed that these hands didn't count as beings with supernatural abilities. Realizing that his efforts were futile, Gustav decided to flee the surroundings and leave the shadowy entities alone for now. "This isn't getting me anywhere," he thought with a slight look of frustration simmering beneath his calm exterior. "I need to find out more about what's going on here." Gustav activated his void, stepping boots again, vanishing from the spot and reappearing on the other side of the planet. He continued to explore the decomposed remains of what used to be Earth. As he moved through the ruins, he saw more of the dark, shadowy entities. Some took the form of hands, like the one that attacked him earlier, while others appeared as amorphous blobs of darkness that seemed to absorb all light around them. They moved sluggishly as if they were drawn to any semblance of life or energy. "These things are everywhere," Gustav muttered to himself, watching one of the shadowy blobs engulf a piece of debris, turning it into darkened ash. What could have caused this? How did Earth, and possibly other planets, end up like this? He continued to theorize as he moved. Could this be the after effects of that? Gustav had a number of guesses, but his mind main hinged on a particular one. His thoughts were interrupted by another shadowy hand emerging from the ground. He quickly void-stepped away, avoiding contact, and reappearing a safe distance from the entity. "I can't let them touch me again." He decided to explore other planets in the surrounding void, hoping to find more clues. Using his void-stepping boots, he began to traverse the vast expanse of space, moving from one desolate planet to another. Each one bore the same signs of destruction and shadowy infestation. Their surfaces were scorched and marked with deep craters. As he explored, he noticed that the shadowy entities varied in form and behavior. Some were aggressive, like the hands that had attacked him, while others seemed more passive, simply existing in their darkened state. "Every planet is the same," he observed, standing on the surface of a particularly large planet. "It's like a plague has swept through this entire region, leaving nothing but darkness and decay in its wake." He also observed that the entities seemed to be drawn to any source of light or energy, which explained why they had attacked him. "I can't waste any more time," he thought as his eyes scanned the desolate landscape. "I need to find planet Humbad." Gustav had looked around enough to get a general idea of what caused all of this, but this was the future. It hadn't happened yet, and there was still hope. What he needed to do, now more than ever, was find planet Humbad, but the problem of which direction to head in remained. Each one bore the same signs of destruction and shadowy infestation. Their surfaces were scorched and marked with deep craters. "Every planet is the same," he observed, standing on the surface of a particularly large planet. "It's like a plague has swept through this entire region, leaving nothing but darkness and decay in its wake." As he explored, he noticed that the shadowy entities varied in form and behavior. Some were aggressive, like the hands that had attacked him, while others seemed more passive, simply existing in their darkened state. He also observed that the entities seemed to be drawn to any source of light or energy, which explained why they had attacked him. He suddenly got an idea and opened the system panel. From the system panel, he decided to check his 5 years quests, or specifically, the one he hadn't completed yet. Locate dimension 6 on planet Humbad, progress 89.10/100%. Gustav noticed that the percentage fluctuated as he moved. He took a step toward the west, watching the progress decrease to 89.5%. Turning to the northeast, the percentage climbed back up to 89.15%. "Northeast it is," he muttered to himself while taking off into the air with a burst of speed. The void stepping boots activated, propelling him forward with incredible velocity. He flew through the stagnant Sidereus void, causing the remnants of destroyed planets and moons to blur past him. The journey was arduous, with Gustav encountering more of the dark, shadowy entities along the way. They seemed to be drawn to his presence, reaching out with their tendrils in an attempt to ensnare him. Despite the burst of speed from the void's stepping boots, which gave him the ability to travel hundreds of light years in just an instant, he would still encounter the shadowy entities. They're everywhere. Gustav noticed that sometimes they even appeared in space, above the decimated planets. He flew over the charred remains of what had once been thriving cities, now nothing more than crumbling ruins swallowed by darkness. Each new planet he encountered seemed to share the same fate, a grim reminder of the void's corrupting influence. As he flew, Gustav kept an eye on the system panel, monitoring the progress percentage. It was slow, but it was increasing, guiding him ever closer to his goal. Gustav felt like he had been moving for hours already, but who knew if this part of space was bound by the normal laws of time? For all he knew, it could have been months already. Nevertheless, he kept soaring through the stagnant Sidereus void. His focus remained steadfast on the system panel in his vision, the progress bar slowly creeping upwards. Locate dimension 6 on planet Humbad. Progress 98.00/100%, just a bit more, Gustav muttered to himself, his voice barely audible in the vacuum of space. As the percentage reached 98, Gustav's surroundings began to distort. He found himself caught in a peculiar phenomenon. The fabric of space-time seemed to twist and ripple around him. Every time he surged forward, he was inexplicably transported to a different location within the void. Locate dimension 6 on planet Humbad. Progress 95.00/100%. What is this? Gustav frowned, attempting to comprehend the nature of the spatial anomaly. He tried again, using his lightning blitz to increase his speed, hoping to break through whatever was hindering his progress. In a flash, he found himself somewhere else, the scenery unchanged but the coordinates different. Locate dimension 6 on planet Humbad. Progress 94.00/100%. The progress percentage reduction was particularly frustrating. No matter what I do, it's the same result, Gustav muttered. He paused for a moment, hovering in the void, and pondered his situation. If the direct approach isn't working, perhaps there's another way. Gustav decided to try a different tactic. He reached out with his perception, extending it as far as he could within the constraints of the stagnant Sidereus void. Despite the oppressive environment, he focused on sensing any anomalies or disturbances that might explain the warping space. Unfortunately, he couldn't really pick up on much, but he could tell that the spatial anomaly was like a wall that extended far deep into the stagnant Sidereus void. One thing he knew about walls was that they always had an end. With this thought in mind, Gustav decided to go around it. The void's stepping boots glowed, and he took a step forward. Threary, he instantly reappeared, 5,000 light years away from his initial position. Locate dimension 6 on planet Humbad. Progress 91.00/100%. The progress percentage had reduced by so much, but Gustav could still sense the spatial anomaly around, so he stepped forward once more. This time he reappeared, 10,000 light years away. Locate dimension 6 on planet Humbad. Progress 84.00/100%. Gustav couldn't sense the spatial anomaly anymore and immediately turned to the side before surging forward with speed. He inputted more energy into the void stepping boots this time and crossed a distance of more than 10,000 light years in a single second. Fortunately, he was not sent reeling back this time. Progress 92. 10%. He let out a sigh of relief after seeing the progression. He was on the right track. He continued forward, watching the percentage steadily climb. Almost there, Gustav thought. He kept pushing forward, and soon he found himself in an area where planets were few and far between. The void seemed to stretch endlessly, but there was a subtle difference in the atmosphere. As Gustav moved further, the number of planets in the surroundings kept reducing. Chapter 1599 You're Joking. Chapter 1599 You're Joking Author's Note. Unedited chapter. Eldris addressed the group. We have our individual paths to follow, but our ultimate goal is the same. We must stay connected and be ready to support each other when the time comes. We've been through a lot together. No matter where we go or what we face, we are family. Stay safe, everyone. We'll meet again, Endrick stated. Take care, everyone. I'll see you when I see you, Falco added. Be careful out there. Do come back safely, Angie said to Endrick. Clapped Endrick on the shoulder. Keep in touch, all right. The group told one another goodbye and got ready to part ways. Rhea grinned in excitement. Let's go, Endrick. Adventure awaits. You know, it's not all going to be that simple, right? Endrick had to remind Rhea that it was going to be dangerous. With their farewells said, the group began to disperse. Falco turned to head back to Earth, his mind already on a reunion with his father. Angie prepared to return to the MBO, and he was ready to head back to the Independent Council. They could only hope for Gustav's safe return. Eldris set off to take his rightful place as the leader of his family. Endrick and Rhea set off together in Gustav's spacecraft. This mission is important. The outworldly needs all of his sacred items. Rhea nodded. I understand, Endrick. I intend to take it seriously. In a high-tech laboratory on a secluded part of Earth, the air buzzed with the soft whir of advanced machinery and the faint crackle of static from numerous holographic projections. The room was large and filled with gleaming surfaces, as well as an intricate array of scientific instruments. Holograms of molecular structures, energy fields, and biomechanical blueprints floated in the air, casting a soft blue glow over the metallic walls. Grand Commander Cheyenne, an elderly but authoritative-looking man with a mane of silver hair and a diamond shard embedded in his forehead, stood at the center of this laboratory. His silvery eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail with an unreadable expression. Beside him was Scientist Merkel, a slim man with sharp features and intense, intelligent eyes that seemed to see beyond the present. Merkel, Cheyenne began with a resonant and commanding tone. You mentioned a breakthrough in your research regarding the dark plane. I'm eager to hear the details. Scientist Merkel nodded with a spark of excitement in his eyes. Indeed, Grand Commander Cheyenne, we have made significant progress. Our research team has been working tirelessly, and we've developed 2 new methods that could change the tide in our struggle against the dark plane. Grand Commander Cheyenne's expression remained stern, though his interest was piqued. Go on. Merkel gestured to a nearby holographic display, which shifted to show a complex energy diagram. The first method involves stabilizing our soldiers' strength while they're in the dark plane. As you know, the dark plane has a debilitating effect on our forces, weakening them significantly. We've discovered a way to counteract this effect, allowing our soldiers to maintain their regular strength levels despite the plane's influence. Grand Commander Cheyenne nodded while absorbing the information. That is indeed promising, but you mentioned a second method as well. Scientist Merkel's eyes gleamed with a mixture of excitement and caution. Yes, the second method is even more revolutionary. We've found a way to harness the dark plane's unique energy fields to amplify our soldiers' strength to unprecedented levels. By tapping into the dark plane's latent power, we can significantly enhance their abilities, potentially giving us a decisive advantage. However, that isn't all. This second method is also more complex because this technique harnesses energy from both the dark plane and the future potential of the mixed blood soldiers. The result is a dramatic amplification of their strength, multiplying their capabilities many times over. Cheyenne raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. Amplifying their strength sounds like a significant advantage. Why not focus solely on that? Merkel sighed, knowing the difficult truth he had to convey. While the amplification method offers immense power, it comes with severe risks. The dark plane's energy is highly volatile and unpredictable. By tapping into their future selves, the soldiers effectively accelerate their life force consumption. After the battle, they are likely to perish due to the immense strain on their bodies and minds. Cheyenne's eyes narrowed, considering the implications. I see. So, the first method provides stability and safety, while the second offers power but with greater risks. Exactly, Merkel affirmed. We must weigh the benefits against the potential dangers. While the amplification method could give us a critical edge in battle, we must be cautious in its application. A heavy silence settled over the room as Grand Commander Cheyenne absorbed the gravity of Merkel's words. So, if we pick the amplification method, we're asking our soldiers to make the ultimate sacrifice, Cheyenne said slowly with a heavy voice. Yet, if we're not ready to put everything on the line, we risk losing the battle entirely. Merkel nodded with a resolute expression. Cheyenne's gaze was intense as he considered the options. This is a difficult decision, but one we must make with clear eyes. We cannot afford to lose this battle. Focus your efforts on refining the amplification method. We need to ensure it is as effective and safe as possible under the circumstances. Merkel met Cheyenne's gaze, understanding the gravity of the command. I will prioritize the amplification method. Our team will work tirelessly to perfect it. With your permission, we will begin advanced trials immediately. You have my permission. How soon can we expect results? Grand Commander Cheyenne inquired. Merkel considered the timeline, already calculating the necessary steps. If all goes well, we should have preliminary results within the next few weeks. We'll start with controlled simulations and move to live trials as soon as we are confident in the process. Cheyenne's expression softened slightly, showing a rare moment of empathy. Remember, Merkel, these are not just soldiers. They are our people, the live blood of the future generation. Ensure that every precaution is taken to protect them, even as we push forward. Merkel placed a reassuring hand on Cheyenne's arm. I understand, Grand Commander. We will do everything in our power to safeguard their lives and honor their sacrifices. Grand Commander Cheyenne nodded, a rare smile touching his lips. Good. Keep me informed of your progress. The fate of our forces, and perhaps even the fate of Earth and the entire universe, rests on our ability to navigate these challenges. With a final nod, Grand Commander Cheyenne turned and left the laboratory. His mind was already shifting to the broader strategic implications of their work and how he would break the news to the other Grand Commanders. Merkel watched him go, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The lab buzzed with a renewed sense of urgency as scientist Merkel briefed his team, outlining the critical steps needed to advance their research. The following days were a blur of intense activity. Scientists and engineers worked around the clock, their focus on perfecting the amplification method. The air was filled with the vibrations of advanced machinery, the flicker of holographic displays, and the quiet murmur of intense discussions. Grand Commander Cheyenne visited frequently to observe the simulations, review data, and provided guidance. His authoritative demeanor inspired confidence and determination in the team. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows over the secluded facility, Cheyenne and Merkel stood before a large holographic projection displaying the latest data from the trials. The screen showed a detailed analysis of the energy flow, the physiological impacts on the soldiers, and the projected outcomes of the amplification process. Merkel, these preliminary results look promising, Grand Commander Cheyenne remarked as his eyes scanned the data. But we must be absolutely certain before we move to live trials. The stakes are too high for any margin of error. Merkel nodded with a serious expression. I agree, Grand Commander. We've seen significant improvements in the simulations, but we need to ensure the process is as stable as possible. We're conducting rigorous stress tests and refining the energy transfer protocols to minimize the risks. Cheyenne's gaze was intense. And the soldiers? Have you identified those willing to undergo the trials? Yes, Merkel replied. We've carefully selected volunteers who understand the risks and are prepared to make the sacrifice if necessary. They are some of our most dedicated and courageous individuals. Cheyenne had a slightly sentimental look in his eyes. Their bravery will not be forgotten. Ensure that they are given every support and preparation needed. They must be ready in mind and body. We will do everything we can to honor their commitment and protect their lives, Merkel stated. The days turned into weeks, and the trials progressed with increasing success. The team fine-tuned the amplification process, addressing each challenge with meticulous attention to detail. The volunteers underwent rigorous training, both physical and psychological, preparing themselves for the immense task ahead. Chapter 16, 100 the End. Chapter 16, 100 the End, author's note. Unedited, chapter Gustav heart pounded with desperation as Angie Blade approached at a speed quicker than he could activate his dimensional bracelet. Lightning Blitz has been activated. As he triggered the Lightning Blitz, his form dissolved into a streak of lightning, racing away from her. He reappeared over 1,000 miles away in an instant, basking in the change of scenery. Before he could even process his next move, a sharp pain erupted in his chest. Angie's blade, dark and malevolent, had followed him through space and time, stabbing deep into his heart. His eyes widened in disbelief as he looked down at the blade protruding from his chest. Dark, corrosive energy spread rapidly from the point of infiltration, coursing through his veins and seeping into his very being. No, Angie, he whispered, feeling the life force draining from him. He dropped to the ground with his body convulsing as the dark energy continued to spread, snuffing out the light within him. Angie stood a short distance away, her blade still connected to him through a thin, almost imperceptible thread of darkness. Her eyes were blank, devoid of the warmth and life that had once defined her. In the depths of her mind, a voice whispered, "Good human, you have destroyed the outworldly." Suddenly, Angie's eyes flickered with recognition. The haze clouding her mind began to lift, and she stared in horror at Gustav's lifeless form. Tears welled up in her eyes, streaming down her cheeks as she fell to her knees beside him. "Gustav?" Her voice broke with emotion. The voice in her head persisted, cold and unyielding. "Now, kill yourself as well." Angie clutched her head. "What have I done?" "Kill yourself." She raised the blade towards her neck in the next instant. Meanwhile, in the void of darkness that was now Gustav's consciousness, he floated aimlessly. The system's voice echoed around him. "You have died, Gustav. The darkness from the blade is interfering with your regeneration and reincarnation abilities. Does that mean I can't come back to life?" Gustav questioned. "If your reincarnation bloodline doesn't kick in, you won't. No, this can't be the end. There must be something that can be done." The system responded, its tone almost apologetic. "I do not know of any solution. The dark energy is too powerful." Images from the system's feedback flashed before Gustav, showing Angie kneeling by his corpse, her form racked with sobs. She held the blade to her neck, her resolve faltering as the voice urged her to end her life. "No, Angie, don't!" Gustav shouted into the void, but his voice reached no ears. He thought of Falco, Endrick, and Ealdris, who were on their way to the Alliance. He thought of all the battles they had fought together, the sacrifices they had made. This couldn't be the end. It couldn't. Angie's tearful eyes met the blade as she prepared to decapitate herself. "I'm sorry, Gustav. I'm so sorry." Desperation clawed at Gustav's soul. "There has to be a way," he thought, his mind frantically searching for any glimmer of hope. In the midst of his despair, a golden light began to glow in the void. It started as a faint flicker, but grew brighter with each passing moment. Gustav reached out, his fingers brushing against the light. To his surprise, it felt warm and familiar. The ancient hourglass, the system's voice noted with a hint of surprise. The hourglass appeared above Gustav's corpse, its sands shimmering with an ethereal glow. As it turned upside down, the golden sand within began to flow in reverse. Time itself started to rewind. Gustav felt a pull as his consciousness was drawn back to the light. The dark energy receded, and the wound in his chest closing as if it had never been there. The blade poised at Angie's neck suddenly froze. Her eyes widened as she watched the events around her unfold in reverse. The golden light enveloped both Gustav and Angie, reversing the damage done by their brutal fight. The buildings they had destroyed reformed, the earth healed, and the very fabric of reality stitched itself back together. The pain and agony that had consumed them both dissipated. Gustav found himself suspended in the vast, timeless void as the universe rewound. Watching events unfold in reverse, he saw Jack's body reassemble, Angie's deadly blade retreat from his heart, and everything gradually resetting. His consciousness floated above it all, detached from the temporal currents. He devised a plan to trap and isolate Angie, ensuring her dark influence would no longer pose a threat. When the universe's timeline reached the point of Angie's initial appearance, Gustav seized the ancient hourglass, stopping the reversal. Time halted, and he re-entered his body. Gustav bolted toward the icy region where Jack and Angie were about to clash. Arriving just in time, he stood between them. Jack, sensing the shift in time and retaining his memories from the other timeline, immediately lunged to strike Angie down. Gustav intercepted him, shouting, "Stop, Jack! There's another way!" Jack's expression twisted in confusion and anger. "Gustav, you can't protect her. She's too dangerous." Ignoring Jack's protests, Gustav turned to Angie and embraced her tightly. "I will end your torment," he whispered. Activating assimilation, he began to absorb her body into his own. Angie struggled as the process began. Her black and white form twisted and writhed, trying to escape the pull. "Kruha!" she screamed in a tone filled with both rage and agony. The assimilation was excruciating, each second stretching into an eternity. Gustav felt every ounce of her pain, the darkness within her fighting against him. The air around them shimmered with energy, the ground beneath them cracking and heaving under the immense pressure. Jack watched while clenching his fists in frustration. He wanted to intervene, but something in Gustav's resolve held him back. "Gustav, if this goes wrong, I will have no other choice but to end you alongside with her." Gustav gritted his teeth, his voice strained. "You won't have to." The process continued for nearly an hour, the struggle evident on both their faces. Slowly, Angie's dark form began to meld with Gustav's, her features blending into his own. His skin took on a pale hue, and dark tendrils of energy swirled around him. Finally, with a final, agonizing surge of power, Gustav completed the assimilation. His body now bore a mixture of his and Angie's features, a stark contrast of light and dark. He gasped for breath, feeling the surging darkness within him. Without hesitation, Gustav plunged his hand into his chest, gritting his teeth against the searing pain. His fingers wrapped around something solid, and with a fierce tug, he pulled out an entirely human Angie. She emerged from his body, collapsing to the ground, unconscious but free from the dark influence that had consumed her. Gustav, now bearing the full brunt of the darkness, fought to contain it. The black energy roiled within him, threatening to overwhelm his senses. His vision blurred, and he felt himself slipping into unconsciousness. Kill. Destroy. Kill. Destroy. Retrieve the dark angel. Cause catastrophe. Kill the strongest. His mind raced with all sorts of thoughts that sought to consume him. Jack rushed forward, catching Gustav before he hit the ground. "Gustav, stay with me," he shouted. Gustav's eyes fluttered open for a moment, his voice barely a whisper. "Jack, take care of her. She's free now. I have to put myself to sleep, or the voices will overwhelm me. Help them." With that, Gustav's body went limp, the darkness still churning within him. Jack carefully laid him down beside Angie, both of them unconscious but alive. As the wind held around them, Jack took a deep breath. His thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. "This kid, you truly are something else," he muttered. But what did he mean by help them? Jack wondered internally. Inside Gustav's spacecraft, Eldris, Falco, and Endrick were gathered around the central control panel. The ship AI's voice echoed through the cabin, informing them that their journey would take approximately 3 days, after passing through designated wormholes. 3 days, E said, tapping the console thoughtfully. "That gives us enough time to review our plans and ensure we're ready for anything." Eldris nodded, his eyes shimmering with determination. "We've gone over it countless times, but we need to be absolutely certain. There's no room for error." Falco leaned back in his seat as dark energy swirled subtly around his fingers. "I just hope there won't be any mishaps. Rhea is counting on us." Endrick, sitting slightly apart from the others, felt a gnawing unease that he couldn't shake. He didn't want to alarm the group, so he kept his concerns to himself. As the conversation continued around him, he excused himself quietly and made his way to one of the private spaces in the ship. The room was dimly lit, providing a quiet retreat from the bustling activity outside. Endrick took a deep breath and communicated with Husarius, a glowing green that appeared on his forehead, pulsating gently. "Husarius!" Endrick called softly, his voice echoing in the small chamber. "I need your guidance." The familiar, calming presence of Husarius filled his mind. "Endrick, what troubles you?" "There's something off," Endrick admitted. Chapter 16:01 The Last Dance. Chapter 16:01 The Last Dance, author's note. Unedited chapter, come on, Gustav taunted while leaning forward slightly. "You want a chance, don't you? A host with real power. Isn't that what you're looking for? Or are you just going to dissolve into nothing?" The darkness seemed to tremble, drawn toward him despite itself. Then, with a sudden, desperate lunge, it surged forward, reaching out toward him in a reckless attempt. Gustav didn't flinch. Instead, he opened himself up, allowing the shadowy tendrils to slip through his defenses, to infiltrate his being. The corruption flooded into him with a cold, suffocating sensation spreading through his veins as it tried to take hold. For a moment his vision darkened, his senses dulled as the darkness sought to gain control. But Gustav's mind remained a fortress. His will was an unyielding force that refused to be swayed. "Is that all you've got?" Gustav's voice echoed within his own mind, taunting the corruption now struggling to establish dominance within him. The darkness thrashed, clawing at his consciousness. Its tendrils writhed as it tried to overpower him. But Gustav's presence was too powerful. Every attempt to consume him was met with resistance. Every tendril was blocked and cast aside as he began to assimilate the corruption instead. "You thought you'd use me as a host? Foolish. I'm the one using you." Gustav's voice reverberated within the confines of his own mind as he tightened his grip on the shadowy force, drawing it deeper, trapping it within his psyche. The corruption shuddered, realizing too late that it had fallen into a trap. It struggled, flailing wildly, but Gustav's was unbreakable. Slowly, he began to absorb the darkness, breaking it down, examining every fragment of its essence. As he delved deeper into its core, flashes of memories began to surface, moments from its existence, echoes of the malevolent intent that had driven it. The darkness had come from Nocturnus, a fragment of his power sent to wreak havoc. But beneath the layers of malice, there was something else, a memory of an object, a sense of purpose, a place, the sword. Gustav allowed his eyes to close, focusing on the fragments of memories he had taken from the dark corruption. Somewhere within those faint glimpses was the answer he needed, and he could almost feel the sword's presence, like an echo calling out to him from across the vast expanse of the universe. In his mind's eye, a hazy vision began to sharpen, the sword embedded deep in the ground of a distant, desolate world. The environment was half erased, the remnants of a cracked planet, its other half fractured into a floating ring of jagged rock and frozen debris. This world was bathed in an unnatural, eerie glow, almost as if it were a void in itself. Just as Gustav reached for more clarity, the echo in his mind suddenly sharpened. "It's there," he murmured, locking onto a faint sensation of cold, malevolent energy. But before Gustav could fully register the location, a booming, cold voice echoed through his mind, ripping through his concentration. "The darkness is mine to command, outworldly," Nocturnus snarled with contempt and hatred. "You may have glimpsed it, but you will never find it." Gustav's grip on the darkness shattered, the remnants of the corrupted energy forcibly pulled from his mind, leaving him momentarily disoriented. The vision of the fractured planet dissolved, fading to black as Nocturnus severed any connection Gustav had to the darkness. "Nocturnus," Gustav voiced with a tone of low frustration. He lifted his hand, dissolving the crystalline cage surrounding the city as he descended back to the streets. A moment later, Endrik appeared beside him, having blinked down from the sky. "What happened?" Endrik questioned with an expression concern. Gustav exhaled before filling Endrik in on everything that had gone down and how he just lost the corruption he assimilated. "I caught a glimpse of the sword, but just for a moment. The sword is embedded somewhere out there still in half of that torn, desolate world. But before I could see where it was exactly, Nocturnus broke in and took the corruption back. I lost the location." Endrik's shoulders slumped as his face contorted with frustration. "So we're back to square one." Gustav shook his head. "Not quite. I saw two distinct features, a hazy teal planet in the background and an unnatural light, almost void-like, surrounding it. If we can find a world with those features, we'll find the sword." Endrik's gaze hardened. "All right, that's something to go on, but we'll need to be thorough. A hazy teal planet and an eerie glow. There can't be many places like that." Gustav nodded in agreement. "It'll be a difficult task, but it's our best lead." Endrik looked determined. "Then let's get started. We'll go through every record of worlds that have been impacted by this corruption. I'm not letting Nocturnus keep us from stopping him." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, EE and Alevra were locked in a relentless chase. Their once sturdy spacecraft was now battered and torn. Its shielding had long cracked. Sparks were flying from its engines as it struggled to hold together. For days, the Gustavo Alliance member who had been hunting them had trailed them without rest. It was like a dark shadow that tore through space and time to follow them wherever they tried to hide. ES hands moved rapidly across the console. His eyes focused as he glanced back at Alevra, who was seated beside him, looking exhausted but resolute. "We're losing the shields," her voice was tight with concern. "If he gets through again, we won't last another attack." He gritted his teeth while opening another vortex with a snap of his fingers. "We're not giving up just yet," he replied while forcing their ship through the swirling portal and into a different section of space. As they emerged, a tense silence filled the ship. For a moment, it seemed as if they had managed to evade their pursuer. But then the silence shattered as another rip in space appeared before them. The same dark figure stepped out. His eyes gleamed with a twisted amusement as he closed the distance between them once again. Damn it, he's persistent, he muttered in clear frustration. Elevra looked at him as a calmness settled over her face despite the situation. I think it's time we stop running. We need to face him. He glanced at her in surprise. Are you sure? You were against it before. Elevra smiled with a determined glint in her eye. That was before. I didn't have you then, but now I do. Let's do this together. Their eyes met, and there was a moment of unspoken understanding between them. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers, his expression softening as he whispered, Then let's give him a fight he'll never forget. Or will forget, because he definitely will die. Ha, shut up. Elevra chuckled lightly. Without another word, he leaned in and they shared a brief, fierce kiss. As they pulled away, they were both ready to face the figure. Almost on cue, the dark figure's voice echoed through the void of space, a sinister edge to his words. So, you two lovebirds have finally decided to stop running, have you? He sneered while crossing his arms. I must admit, this has been one of the longest chases I've ever had to embark on. Normally, I kill my prey instantly, but I suppose this was worth the exercise. You two have chosen a fine place for your burial ground. He gestured around them, where only empty outer space stretched for hundreds of millions of miles, nothing but the faint glimmer of stars in the distance. And Elevra both stepped out of their ruined spacecraft as their bodies floated in the vast expanse, facing down the relentless Gustavo Alliance member with a calm, deadly focus. You've chased us long enough like a junkie that can't seem to get enough of the high, E stated with a cold tone. It ends here. The man smirked, tilting his head with a mocking expression. Bold words, but words are meaningless without power to back them up. I'll enjoy ripping the both of you apart. Elevra's gaze hardened as the purple energy in her third eye beginning to pulse with power. You talk too much. Let's see if you can fight half as well as you threaten. The figure's face twisted in rage, and with a roar he launched himself at them. His fists crackled with dark energy as he closed the gap. E and Elevra moved as one in synergy, honed by years of combat experience and the trust they shared. He snapped his fingers, opening a vortex just as the man's fist was about to connect. The man's punch hit empty space as he was pulled into the portal, only to reappear on the opposite side of E, who was already prepared. With a quick move, E swung his arm in an arc, releasing a concentrated blast of violet energy that slammed into the man, sending him careening backward. Chapter 1602, Look at the Skies. Chapter 1602, Look at the Skies, author's note. Unedited chapter 11 didn't waste a second. She raised her hand, her third eye glowing intensely as she unleashed a beam of concentrated energy straight toward their pursuer. The man barely managed to twist out of the way. The edge of the beam grazed his shoulder and leaving a trail of smoldering, burnt flesh. You. He growled while clutching his shoulder, his eyes blazing with fury. Unfortunately, that isn't enough to stop me. You're nothing but insects compared to me. Then we'll just have to prove you wrong. Elevra shot back, her voice steady and unwavering. They clashed once again, a flurry of attacks exchanged in the endless void of space. The Gustavo Alliance member struck out with a savage intensity, his fists creating shockwaves that rippled through the stars. But E and Elevra moved in perfect harmony, evading his attacks, countering with precision and speed. E opened portals to redirect the man's attacks, turning his own strength against him, while Elevra unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, her power growing with each strike. They wore him down slowly, chipping away at his defenses, frustrating him with every missed blow. Enough! The man roared, summoning a massive surge of energy as he prepared to unleash a devastating attack. But E saw it coming, his eyes narrowing as he whispered to Elevra, *** now. Together, they moved in sync, closing in on him from both sides. As the man released his attack, EE opened a portal, redirecting the blast back at him, while a lever struck from the opposite side with a focus beam that pierced through his defenses. Caught in his own attack and a lever's energy, the man let out a howl of agony, his form disintegrating under the combined assault. As his body faded into nothingness, EE and Alevra floated there in silence, the empty stretch of space around them a stark reminder of the battle they had just survived. They turned to each other, exhaustion etched on their faces, but there was also a deep sense of satisfaction in their eyes. Asterisk, asterisk, we did it! Asterisk, asterisk, Alevra murmured, her voice soft, a hint of disbelief in her tone. E gave her a small, triumphant smile. Asterisk, asterisk together were unstoppable. They drifted closer, sharing a moment of silent victory, the vastness of space stretching out before them as they prepared to return home, knowing they had faced the darkness and won. SSS Empress Daria, with her authoritative bearing, still managed to engage in light-hearted banter, showing a more relaxed side of herself that was rarely seen. Nearby, Falco, Eldris, Endrick, and Ria were having the time of their lives at the shore. ES melanin skin glistened in the sunlight, his wet, bushy afro hair bouncing as he moved. His infectious laughter filled the air as he cracked jokes and splashed water at his friends. You look like a sea monster with that hair. Falco teased while ducking to avoid another splash. Oh yeah. E retorted with a grin. At least I don't look like a rat that got drowned in milk, Falco. Eldris had built an impressive sandcastle, much to the admiration of the others. Check this out, he said proudly, gesturing to his creation. A castle fit for a king. Eldris rarely ever showed this childish side of him, so it is quite heartwarming to see him playing around like this. Endrick dashed around with youthful energy, making small crabs float from the middle of the ocean. Got one, he exclaimed while holding up a tiny crab for everyone to see before gently releasing it back into the water. Raya lawed at Endrick's antics and joined in the fun. Soft fluorescent lighting created a serene atmosphere, while a large window offered a breathtaking view of the moonlit ocean. A small seating area with plush chairs and a coffee table invited relaxation, and the bathroom, visible through an open door, boasted a deep soaking tub and a rainfall shower. Gustav sat in one of the chairs, his eyes fixated on the holographic system notification that hovered in front of him. 5-year quest completed. 1/2 become the world's strongest mixed blood, issuing rewards. He had been staring at it for days, the mystery of the delayed reward gnawing at him. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door, before getting up and crossing the room. As expected, he opened the door to find Angie standing there. Hey, she greeted softly, stepping inside when he motioned for her to enter. Hey, Angie, Gustav replied, closing the door behind her. What's up? I couldn't sleep, she admitted, her eyes searching his. I wanted to talk to you. Gustav nodded, leading her to the seating area. They sat down, the soft cushions sinking under their weight. What's on your mind? Angie took a deep breath. I've been thinking about what happened during the trial. How did you manage to dominate the darkness and regain consciousness? You're really Gustav, right? Gustav's expression grew serious. It's not something I managed to do easily, he began. I've been fighting that darkness since the day I saved you. That was the reason I choose to be unconscious in the first place. It provided me a better chance. Angie listened intently, her eyes never leaving his. But you managed to control it. How? I didn't really dominate it. I just isolated it using the 3-in-1 golden body. It allowed me to compartmentalize the darkness, keep it confined to one area. He lifted his shirt, revealing the left side of his abdomen where a dark, swirling pattern was etched into his skin. The sight of it was both mesmerizing and unsettling. This is where I've isolated the darkness, he explained. It could increase my strength to unprecedented heights, but it would also make me lose my mind. That's why I've decided to keep it isolated forever. Angie's eyes widened in surprise and curiosity. She reached out, her fingers lightly tracing the dark pattern. "It's incredible," she whispered as her touch sending a jolt of electricity through Gustav's body. "I mean, you're incredible," she added. Gustav shivered at her touch, feeling the electricity of her fingers on his bare skin. He gently grabbed her hand to stop it from continuously tracing the pattern as their eyes locked in an intense gaze. "Angie," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Their faces drew closer, the air between them charged with an electric, romantic tension. The world seemed to shrink until it was just the two of them. Their breaths mingled briefly as their lips met in a passionate kiss. The kiss soon deepened and their hands began to explore each other. Gustav's fingers trailed down her back, feeling the smooth fabric of her dress, while Angie's hands moved to his chest, tugging at his shirt. They pulled back for a moment, their eyes filled with desire and need. "Gustav!" Angie breathed, her voice husky with emotion. "Angie!" he replied, his voice equally filled with longing. They moved with a sense of urgency, their clothes discarded piece by piece. Gustav's shirt fell to the floor, followed by Angie's dress. They stood there for a moment, taking in each other's forms, their hearts racing. The room seemed to glow with a soft, golden light as they came together again, their bodies pressing close. Gustav lifted Angie, carrying her to the bed where they continued to kiss, their passion intensifying with each passing second. As they lay down, the softness of the bed enveloping them, Gustav and Angie let their desires take over. Their movements were a dance of love and need, their touches gentle and urgent all at once. They whispered each other's names, their voices filled with emotion, as they became lost in the moment. Gustav left a trail of kisses down Angie's soft skin, causing her to shiver each time in excitement. She could feel something hard and thick poking her belly region. She instinctively reached out to grab it. Chapter 16:03 The Higher the Risk. Chapter 16:03 The Higher the Risk, Author's Note. Unedited, chapter the realization that this powerful tool came at the ultimate price left a bitter taste in their mouths. The previously enthusiastic dignitary with shimmering scales was the first to break the silence. "Grand Commander, this news is devastating. How can we ask our warriors to make such a sacrifice?" Cheyenne nodded, his face reflecting the inner turmoil he felt. "I understand your concerns. This is not a decision to be taken lightly, but we are faced with an existential threat. The beings of the Dark Plane will not show mercy, and our universe is at stake. We must weigh the cost of using this tool against the potential destruction of all we hold dear." An ethereal figure from the Mystic Enclave spoke up. "We must ensure that those who choose to use this tool are fully aware of the consequences and are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. It is a heavy burden, but one that may be necessary to save countless lives." Another delegate, with metallic skin and a deep, rumbling voice, addressed the room. "Indeed, we may have brave warriors, but we cannot simply send them to their deaths without exploring every possible alternative. Are there no other options, Grand Commander?" Cheyenne took a deep breath. "We are continuing our research, and we are exploring every possible avenue. But as of now, this amplification tool is our best chance to confront the Dark Plane on equal footing. We must prevent the final premonition, as these efforts are crucial to our survival." The room erupted in a mix of voices. Some agreed, while others disagreed. Grand Commander Cheyenne allowed the discussions to continue for a moment before raising his hand again. "Please, everyone. I understand how difficult it is to digest what I've told you. However, we must move forward with caution and unity. We need volunteers from every planet under the Alliance who understand the stakes and are willing to make this sacrifice. We must also continue to work together to find other solutions." Our universe's survival depends on our combined efforts. The delegates nodded in agreement, their faces reflecting resolve. As the meeting continued, the delegates worked together to develop a plan. They discussed how to use the amplification tool strategically. Each step was carefully considered, with the understanding that the stakes had never been higher. Gustav had been in Dimension 6 for what felt like an eternity. The passage of time seemed distorted in this place. The realm itself was like an empty city, maintaining its mechanical and incredibly futuristic constructs, despite the desolation that had befallen Humbad. Gustav found himself in awe of the towering structures and the smoothness of the buildings that defied gravity. The buzzing of machines seemed to operate on their own, defying the decay of time. Yet there was a haunting emptiness, a sense of loss that permeated every corner. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional whir and click of the constructs. Gustav had spent most of his time in a particular construct, an enormous chamber filled with holographic displays and intricate machinery. This construct was one of Origin's. Gustav had been moving around since, and found this one, which was currently showing him planet Humbad's origin. The place reconstructed its planet history in vivid detail, like he was witnessing the occurrences as though he lived in such times. The chamber flickered and shifted, creating a panoramic view of Humbad in its prime. The advanced technology brought the past to life, allowing him to walk through the city as it had once been, filled with vibrant energy and life. So this is how it used to look? Gustav whispered to himself. He felt a deep sense of connection to the place, as if he were witnessing a part of his own heritage. The playback showed bustling streets, filled with the inhabitants of Humbad with fluid and graceful movements. Their clothes, movement machinery, and everything was just out of this world. It was inconceivable. These people, Gustav thought, they were so advanced, so full of life. What happened to them? As he walked through the city, he felt a pang of sadness. He hadn't even had the time to properly think about what had happened to Miss Amy or grieve her loss. The current objective had consumed him, driving him forward with relentless determination. Inasmuch as he wanted to grieve, Miss Amy sacrificed for him to be here, so he knew he had to keep the ball rolling. "Miss Amy," he murmured, "I won't let your sacrifice be in vain." The construct shifted, showing the once thriving city beginning to fall into disarray. The vibrant lights dimmed, the streets grew emptier, and the inhabitants seemed to fade away. Gustav watched as the planet's decline played out before him, the advanced technology unable to prevent the inevitable decay. He reached out to touch one of the holographic figures, a young child with wide, curious eyes. His hand passed through the image, and the child dissolved into a cascade of light. "It's moving too fast," Gustav voiced aloud. The playback continued, showing scenes of chaos and destruction. The once proud buildings crumbled, and the ground split open, revealing the molten core beneath. The inhabitants of Humbad fought desperately to save their world, but their efforts were in vain. The planet was dragged into the stagnant, siderous void, its fate sealed by forces beyond their control. "Slow down," Gustav stated. Everything immediately paused at this moment. "Take it back, and reduce the speed. I want to properly digest it all." It was like the construct had a mind of its own. It began to rescind at a rapid pace. The whole playback restarted, giving Gustav a detailed showdown of planet Humbad's past. As the constructive surroundings shifted and reformed around him, Gustav was transported back in time, witnessing the truth about how everything began. Humans have always believed that we were amongst the first intelligent species, Gustav thought, watching the scenes unfold. But the Slarkovs were here long before us. Their civilization was thriving while Earth was still in its infancy. The city came to life, filled with beings that bore a striking resemblance to humans but with distinct animalistic features. Some had horns curling elegantly from their heads. Others had elongated ears and many had scaly or iridescent skin that shimmered. The playback showed the bustling streets of Humbad, filled with the daily activities of its inhabitants. Advanced vehicles zipped through the air, and towering buildings gleamed with the reflection of the twin suns in their sky, the architecture being far beyond anything Gustav had ever seen. There were energy towers everywhere and devices that didn't need physical charge. As the solar system was displayed, Gustav recognized some things and was shocked. Earth was a neighboring planet in their solar system, Gustav voiced as the construct shifted to show the cosmic relationship between Humbad and Earth. It was so close that the distance between them was shorter than the distance from Earth to Mercury. The scene changed, showing Earth as a barren, lifeless world. The planet's surface was a desolate landscape, devoid of the flora and fauna that would one day flourish there. But it looks like Earth didn't even have humans back then. Just how far back is this? Gustav was still utterly surprised. In stark contrast, Humbad was a vibrant, thriving world, teeming with life and advanced civilizations. Humbad had already borne intelligent species for millennia, Gustav mused. The Slarkovs were the most intelligent, and their technology still surpasses that of Earth even till today. The playback shifted again, showing the development of the Slarkovs' technology. Gustav watched as they harnessed the power of their planet's natural resources, creating energy sources that were clean and inexhaustible. They built towering structures that reached into the sky, and some that lived in the sky with elegant and efficient designs. The Slarkovs had achieved a level of technological sophistication that seemed almost magical. They were so far ahead, Gustav thought, Their understanding of science and technology was unparalleled. Earth only got the short end of the stick. The scenes shifted to show the Slarkovs' daily lives. Gustav saw families gathered together, sharing meals and stories. He saw scholars and scientists working diligently in their laboratories, pushing the boundaries of knowledge and discovery. He saw artists creating breathtaking works of beauty. The Slarkovs truly bore many similarities to Earth. They were so much like humans, Gustav realized, but much more united from the looks of things. The past continued to unfold before Gustav, revealing more layers of the Slarkovs' history and the challenges they faced. The playback showed a time when Humbad existed in an era dominated by powerful beings who were essentially deities. These beings possessed unimaginable power, and their very presence could alter the fabric of reality. Gustav watched in awe as the surroundings shifted to show these deities, titanic figures of immense strength and majesty that existed deep in the solar system. Their origins were unknown. The only known fact was that they ruled the cosmos and had existed since the beginning of time. Chapter 1604 Fan the Flames. Chapter 1604 Fan the Flames. Author's note. Unedited chapter. Gustav watched in surprise as the playback depicted the colossal battle in space. The deities clashed with unimaginable force, their energies creating shockwaves that rippled through the cosmos. The very fabric of reality seemed to tremble under the weight of their conflict. Not again, Gustav thought. The battle reached a catastrophic climax when one of the deities was struck down. Usually, deities were immortal, but the only threat to a deity's immortality was another deity. The defeated deity's corpse, which was massive beyond comprehension, began to drift through space. The playback highlighted the sheer scale of the body, which was as massive as the combination of more than 30 planets. It was incredibly colossal. As the deity's corpse floated toward Humbad's solar system, the sun was blotted out, casting the planet into darkness. The holographic images showed the Slarkovs looking up at the sky in terror and disbelief. Their world plunged into an eerie twilight. From Bolton, the 45th addressed his people in the aftermath of the catastrophe. He stood on a platform within Dimension 6. "My fellow Slarkovs," he said, his voice steady but filled with sorrow, "we face a challenge unlike any we have encountered before. A shadow has been cast over our world, and we must come together to find a way through this darkness. Chief from Bolton, what can we do? Our crops are failing, and our energy reserves are depleting without the sun. How will we survive? As Slarkov asked, from Bolton, the 45th responded with a tone of understanding. We will use the power of Dimension 6 to sustain ourselves, he replied. We have faced great challenges before, and we have always found a way to overcome them. We must remain united and work together to find solutions. While it is well known that Dimension 6 could solve any problem, the problem had to be within the vicinity of the planet and not in outer space. This meant they couldn't ask Dimension 6 to get rid of the deity's corpse, and even if they could, it wouldn't work due to it being the corpse of an actual deity. So, they had to consider a different approach. Gustav watched as the construct showed the Slarkovs mobilizing to address the crisis. They dimensioned 6 to create artificial light sources, attempting to replicate the sun's rays to keep their crops alive. Engineers and scientists worked tirelessly to develop new technologies that could sustain them in the prolonged darkness. In one scene, Gustav saw a group of scientists gathered around a large device that emitted a powerful golden light. This should help keep the crops growing, one of the scientists said, adjusting the settings. It's not a perfect solution, but it will buy us some time. From Bolton, the 45th visited the laboratories, offering his support and encouragement. Your work is vital to our survival, he told the scientists. We must use every resource at our disposal to ensure that our people have what they need to endure this crisis. Despite their efforts, the prolonged darkness began to take its toll. The playback showed scenes of hardship and struggle, with the Slarkovs facing food shortages and energy crises. The once thriving society was now grappling with the harsh reality of their situation. They did their best to keep working to find solutions and survive. The playback continued, depicting the grim reality the Slarkovs faced after the death of the deity and the resultant eclipse of their sun. The initial challenge of surviving in darkness was compounded by a new and insidious threat, an ashy, sand-like pollution that emitted from the deity's corpse. This pollution began to spread through space, turning into a malevolent force that swallowed up orbital bodies, including moons and satellites. Gustav watched as the construct showed the spread of this pollution. It moved with a sinister, creeping inevitability, engulfing everything in its path. The Slarkovs, already struggling with the loss of sunlight, now faced an even greater existential threat. We must protect ourselves, from Bolton the 45th declared, his voice resolute as he addressed the council. This pollution is unlike anything we've encountered before. We need to act quickly to safeguard our planet. The council members and scientists came together in agreement to work quickly on a solution. One of the scientists spoke up. We have developed barriers using the energy from Dimension 6, she said. These barriers should be able to hold off the pollution and give us time to find a more permanent solution. From Bolton, the 45th looked at the council members, determination in his eyes. Let's implement these barriers immediately. Every second counts. The playback shifted to show the Slarkovs working tirelessly to erect the multi-layered barriers. The barriers shimmered with an ethereal light, forming a protective shield around Humbad. As the barriers were activated, the ashy, sand-like pollution met with resistance. The barriers held strong, repelling the malevolent force and preventing it from reaching the planet's surface. The Slarkovs breathed a collective sigh of relief after seeing their efforts pay off. From Bolton, the 45th addressed the people of Humbad with reassurance. The barriers are holding, and we are safe for now. We continue to seek a permanent solution to this threat. The playback showed the Slarkovs returning to their daily lives, their spirits lifted by the temporary reprieve. However, the shadow of the pollution still loomed large. Months turned into years, and the barriers continued to hold. The Slarkovs used this time to develop new technologies and strategies to combat the pollution. Scientists and engineers worked around the clock, searching for a way to neutralize the threat permanently. In one scene, Gustav watched as a group of scientists gathered in a high-tech laboratory, their faces etched with determination. "We've made some progress," one of them said, pointing to a holographic display. "We've developed a prototype device that might be able to disperse the pollution." From Bolton, the 45th, who was present in the lab, listened intently. "Excellent work," he said. "How soon can we test it?" The scientist hesitated. "We're still in the early stages of testing. We need more time to ensure it's safe and effective." From Bolton, the 45th nodded. "Understood. Keep me updated on your progress. The safety of our people depends on it." The scientists did try to test this device, but unfortunately it wasn't as effective as they would have liked it to be. No matter how much of the sandy ash-like substance they dispersed, it always found a way to replicate. It was like they were just wasting their time. Despite their best efforts, the situation took a turn for the worse. The playback showed the barriers beginning to falter, the relentless pressure of the pollution wearing them down. Cracks appeared in the shimmering shield and things were starting to get very dire. The playback showed the relentless assault of the as-high, sand-like pollution against the barriers. The Slarkovs watched in despair as their protective shield continued to weaken and crack. Despite their best efforts, it seemed that all hope was lost. From Bolton, the 45th stood in the command center, his face etched with worry. "We've done everything we can," he said to his advisors. "The barriers won't hold much longer. We need a miracle." Just as the situation seemed dire, a bright light appeared in the sky, cutting through the darkness. The playback showed a figure descending from the heavens, his form glowing with an otherworldly radiance. As he landed on the surface of Humbad, the light around him dimmed to reveal a deity who had taken on a human form. How could one tell that he was a deity? For starters, he got through the barrier with ease and passed the sandy ash-like substance without any trouble. Not to mention his 2 silver eyes that glowed like light bulbs and the majestic presence he carried. The Slarkovs watched in awe as the deity walked among them. He raised his hand, and the ashy, sand-like pollution that had been attacking the barrier began to gather into a swirling mass above his head. "Who are you?" From Bolton, the 45th asked, his voice filled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. He knew it was a deity, but subconsciously still spat this question out. The deity looked at him with kind, ancient eyes. "I am a guardian of balance who came to rectify the harm caused by the battles of my kin," he said. "I apologize for the destruction and chaos that has befallen your world." Gustav watched in amazement as the deity continued to gather the pollution, forming it into a compact, pulsating ball of dark energy. The malevolent force that had been swallowing up orbital bodies was now contained, its threat neutralized, and it had been done with so much ease that no one would doubt the authenticity of the person before them. The deity then raised his other hand, and the skies began to clear. The remains of the fallen deity and the pollution that had darkened their world dissipated, revealing the sun once more. Light flooded the planet, and the Slarkovs cheered in relief and joy. "Thank you," from Bolton, the 45th said, bowing deeply. "You have saved my people." Chapter 1605, Severe Consequences. Chapter 1605, Severe Consequences, Author's Note. Unedited chapter. Gustav's journey to the vestige continued, the gravitational density now almost overwhelming. He took a deep breath, channeling his energy to stabilize himself as he closed the distance, his senses sharpening as he felt the vestige's power calling to him. At last he arrived at his destination, a small, barren planet surrounded by swirling dust clouds and asteroid fragments. It was desolate, isolated, and untouched by time, a fitting resting place for something as powerful as a piece of the outworldly. As he descended toward the planet's surface, he could feel the vestiges' energy thrumming beneath the ground, pulsing with a life of its own. He landed, stepping out onto the cold, cracked terrain, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the energy was strongest. He walked forward, feeling the power intensify with each step, the air growing heavy around him as if the very atmosphere was charged with cosmic energy. Finally, he reached a towering, jagged rock formation, its surface etched with ancient markings that glowed faintly in the dim light. Asterisk, asterisk, this, is it? Asterisk, asterisk, Gustav whispered, his hand reaching out to touch the stone. The moment his fingers brushed against it, the entire structure pulsed with energy, a wave of raw power surging into him, flooding his senses with memories, visions, fragments of a life he had once known. He gasped as the energy coursed through him, his body absorbing the vestige, his mind filling with the knowledge and strength it contained. For a brief moment he felt whole, as if he had regained a part of himself that had been missing for centuries. As the power settled, SSS, he turned his attention to raw assimilation. His genetic transformation bloodline already granted him an assimilation ability, but this one was fundamentally different. With genetic transformation, he could assimilate with living tissue, people, aliens, or organisms. However, raw assimilation opened up a realm of new possibilities. He could merge with non-living matter, potentially even something as vast as a moon or as powerful as a star. The idea was exhilarating, the potential applications endless. As Gustav considered these new bloodlines, his thoughts shifted to the 2-skill evolution cards he had also received as part of his rewards. He pondered which skills to evolve next, knowing that his choices could significantly impact his future capabilities. Before he could make a decision, he recalled the dinner he had agreed to have with Angie's family. Realizing the time, Gustav decided it was best to get ready. He headed to his bedroom, which was a minimal yet compact and cozy setup. He stepped into the ensuite bathroom to freshen up. The shower, with its multiple jets and rainfall feature, was a welcome respite. As the warm water cascaded over him, he allowed himself a moment to relax and clear his mind. Once freshened up, Gustav chose a casual yet stylish outfit. Dark jeans, a crisp white shirt, and a tailored red jacket. He checked his reflection in the mirror, ensuring he looked presentable for dinner. Satisfied, he made his way to the living room, where he grabbed his keys and phone. Before leaving, he sent a quick message to Angie, heading out now. "See you soon." A few moments later, his phone beeped with Angie's reply. "Can't wait. Moi." Gustav smiled and pocketed the device as he stepped towards the balcony area. It would seem that his location had been revealed, so the press was cooped up at the entry point of the skyscraper. The world before him came to a pause as Gustav moved, leapt into the air, and vanished. Gustav stood outside Angie's apartment building with some flowers in his grasp and a slight smile playing on his lips. As he walked up to the apartment door, it swung open to reveal Mr. and Mrs. Villendrobadia. Mrs. Villendrobadia displayed a welcoming smile. "Good evening, Gustav," Mrs. Villendrobadia greeted warmly. "We're so glad you could join us tonight." Mr. Villendrobadia extended his hand. "It's good to see you again, Gustav. Come in, make yourself at home." Gustav shook his hand and stepped inside. "Thank you for having me." The apartment was cozy and inviting, with family holographic photos adorning a side of the wall and the scent of a delicious meal wafting through the air. The dining table was set with elegant dishware, and a variety of mouth-watering dishes were spread out, indicating the effort the family had put into the evening. As they moved into the living room, Gustav noticed Phil, Angie's little brother. Phil was no longer the small boy Gustav remembered. Despite being 15, he was almost fully grown, with a build that hinted at his future strength. "Hey, Phil!" Gustav greeted with a nod, genuinely surprised by his growth. "You've grown a lot since I last saw you." Phil smiled shyly, his voice deeper than before. "Hey, Gustav. Yeah, it's been a while. Angie appeared, a radiant smile on her face as she walked over to Gustav and linked her arm through his. "Come on, everyone. Let's sit down for dinner." They all gathered around the table as the atmosphere was filled with warmth. The meal was a delightful affair, with an array of flavors that showcased Mrs. Villendrobadia's culinary skills. Gustav tried not to compare her cooking to that of Boss Danzos, since he made a habit of doing that for every meal he had. As they ate, they chatted and reminisced about the past, sharing stories and laughter that bridged the time and experiences they had missed. They remembered how things used to be much simpler back in their previous neighborhood before Gustav and Angie joined the MBO. Mr. Villendrobadia recounted an amusing tale from Angie's childhood, causing everyone to laugh. "Remember the time Angie tried to build a rocket in the backyard? She was so determined to reach the stars." Angie groaned, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Dad, not that story again." Gustav chuckled, his heart warming at the familial banter. "I'd love to hear more about Angie's childhood adventures." Mrs. Villendrobadia smiled. She was always so fearless, much like she is now. After the meal, as they moved to the living room for dessert, Mr. and Mrs. Villendrobadia grew more serious. Mr. Villendrobadia cleared his throat and looked at Gustav with sincerity. "Gustav, there's something we need to say," he began. "When Angie disappeared, we were devastated. We were angry and scared, and we took a lot of that out on you. We were wrong." Mrs. Villendrobadia nodded with a remorseful look. "We're so sorry for how we treated you, Gustav. Thank you for saving our daughter. You don't need to apologize. I made a promise to protect Angie and I failed. I can't blame any of you, but I'll make sure to keep that promise in the future." Mr. Villendrobadia's voice was filled with emotions. "Thank you, Gustav. You've done more for our family than we can ever repay." Phil, who had been silent, spoke up. "Gustav, can I talk to you outside for a moment?" Gustav nodded, standing up. "Of course." They stepped out into the cool evening air, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Phil looked at Gustav with a serious look. "I need to apologize, too," Phil began, his voice trembling slightly. "For the longest time, I hated you. When Angie was missing, I hated myself for looking up to you. I blamed you for everything." Gustav remained silent, giving Phil the space to express his feelings. Phil continued, his eyes filled with regret. "When Angie returned and told us what happened, how you sacrificed yourself to save her, I realized how stupid I'd been. You must love her just like we do, maybe even more. When she was lost, you must have been hurt too, right?" Gustav placed a reassuring hand on Phil's shoulder. "I was Phil. But what matters is that Angie is safe now, and that's all I care about." Tears welled up in Phil's eyes as he looked at Gustav. "I'm so sorry for how I treated you. Thank you for saving my sister." Gustav smiled gently, patting Phil's back. "Don't worry about it. We all went through a lot. What's important is how it turned out." Phil wiped his eyes, his voice breaking. "Thank you, big brother Gustav. Really." They stood there for a moment in silence, staring into the distance with smiles on their faces. After a while, Angie appeared at the door, a soft smile on her face. "Everything okay out here?" she asked. Phil nodded with red eyes but a lighter expression. "Yeah, thanks, big brother Gustav." It was obvious that he had been carrying a weight of guilt all this time, and now that he had gotten it off his chest, he felt better. He headed back inside, leaving Gustav and Angie alone. She walked up to him, her eyes filled with love and gratitude. "Thank you for talking to him," she said softly. "Phil led a campaign when you were still unconscious and in custody before your trial." Chapter 1606 on the Search. Chapter 1606 on the Search, author's note. Unedited chapter in the heart of a chaotic and gravity-warped region of space. Gustav hovered just above the rocky surface of a barren world. It bore no inhabitants. He had finally reached his destination, and beneath him, buried deep within the fractured ground, lay the second vestige of his original power. He could feel it humming like a heartbeat, resonating with the fragments he had already absorbed. This energy was familiar, yet ancient, a part of himself he had long forgotten. Taking a deep breath, Gustav reached out and placed his hand against the surface. As soon as his skin made contact, the vestige reacted, sending a surge of power through him. The ground trembled beneath him, cracks snaking across the terrain as the energy rose up like a pulse, fusing into his very being. He closed his eyes, feeling the humanoid-shaped energy wrap around him, absorbing into his core. Every cell in his body seemed to awaken, and the sensation was almost overwhelming. His muscles tensed as a newfound strength coursed through him. It was only a mere extra 1% of his original strength, a fraction of his former glory, but even that small amount felt monumental. The outworldly in his full power was beyond what any ordinary being could comprehend, and now he could feel a sliver of that unimaginable force returning to him. Opening his eyes, Gustav felt the familiar rush of knowledge as another ability from his outworldly repertoire unlocked. He flexed his fingers, the power settling into his veins like a second skin. "Let's see what you've given me this time. Asterisk, asterisk," he murmured to himself as he took a few steps back from the now dormant vestige. With a single thought, he extended his arm, and the air around him seemed to ripple. A faint, almost invisible sphere of energy enveloped him, flickering with a gentle, silver glow. Gustav clenched his fist, and the sphere expanded, stretching out over the entire landscape. Trees, rocks, and even the distant peaks began to bend under the force of his energy. With a flick of his wrist, he pulled it all back, compressing the sphere around him in a rush that sent a shockwave outward, creating a crater beneath him. "Not bad," he voiced with a satisfied tone. After a few more tests, Gustav leaped into the air, flying back toward his waiting spacecraft. The gravitational density continued to press against him, but it was barely noticeable. He reached the spacecraft and climbed aboard, setting his sights on the next vestige. "One more step closer," he murmured as he fired up the engines. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the universe, a small but robust spacecraft cut through the vast emptiness of space. Inside, Endrik, Rhea, and Circe were discussing the next steps in their journey. Circe had insisted on joining them, and after much debate, Endrik had finally agreed, unable to resist her determined gaze. "All right, team, hey race where we're at," Endrik said, leaning over the ship's navigation console. The database came through and cross-referenced the two distinct features that Gustav glimpsed, a hazy teal planet and an unnatural, void-like light. Unfortunately, it returned not one, but 4 locations. Rhea, seated across from him with a frown, crossed his arms. 4 locations? That means 3 of them are not correct? Yes, Endrik confirmed. Great. We're going to need to hop across the galaxies to check each one. Bingo, Endrik replied, bringing up a holographic map. But that's our best shot. We'll need to visit each location and confirm which one actually holds the sword. Circe leaned in with a determined expression, determined. Then let's not waste time. We go in, check, and if it's not the one, we move on. Simple. Endrik glanced at her. You make it sound easy, Circe. You realize these locations aren't exactly next door to each other, right? Circe shrugged while displaying a smile. Doesn't matter. We're doing this for Father. I'd fly to the edge of the universe, if that's what it takes. Rhea chuckled, nodding approvingly. You're relentless. I can see why you insisted on coming. But let's just hope these locations aren't crawling with the Alliance's goons or worse. Endrik pulled up the first destination, pointing to a distant star system marked on the map. The first one's here, on the outskirts of the Ilvorn galaxy. We'll check it out and go from there. Everyone ready? Ready, Circe and Rhea replied in unison. The ship buzzed as Endrick punched in the coordinates, and in an instant they leaped into hyperspace. The stars outside immediately blurred into streaks of light. After what felt like numerous hours, the ship slowed, emerging from hyperspace on the edge of a star system where the first of the 4 potential locations awaited. Outside the ship, a massive teal-hued planet loomed before them, surrounded by swirling clouds and faint, greenish light that gave the atmosphere an ethereal quality. "Well, that's something," Rhea murmured, staring at the planet. "Almost looks like we're in a dream." Cersei's eyes narrowed as she peered out the window. "I don't like it. Something feels off." Endrick nodded in agreement, adjusting the ship's scanners. "Let's keep our guard up. This might be the place, but it could also be a trap. Stay sharp, both of you." They descended through the atmosphere, landing in a remote area of the planet's surface where massive, sharp rocks jutted out of the ground like teeth. The surroundings were eerily quiet, with a pale mist clinging to the ground, casting strange shadows across the barren landscape. "I'll check the scanners for any signs of outworldly energy," Endrick said, adjusting the controls. As he worked, Cersei and Rhea stepped out of the ship, keeping a close eye on the surrounding terrain. They moved cautiously, their senses on high alert as they scanned the area for any threats. "It's dead silent," Cersei whispered, prepared to activate her bloodline at any time. "Too quiet." Rhea nodded. "Yeah, I don't like it either. Shouldn't we have bumped into extraterrestrials by now?" "Endrick, anything on the scanners?" Endrick's voice crackled over their communicators. "No outworldly energy detected yet, but there's a faint residual energy, something that could be connected. It's faint, though. If the sword was here, it's either well hidden or long gone. Let's sweep the area." They spread out, moving through the mist as they searched for any signs of the sword or clues pointing to its whereabouts. Nearly an hour went by with no luck. Endrick could scour the entirety of the planet within seconds, but the mist really made it difficult to cast one's senses like a net across this mysterious world. After some time, Endrick called them back to the ship. "Nothing here, just a residual energy field. Might be a remnant of some old relic, but not the sword. We're moving to the next location." "Well, at least we're one down," Rhea muttered while climbing back aboard. 3 more to go." Cersei sighed, settling into her seat. "Uncle needs to be better with his choices." "Don't call me that." Endrick snapped back. "Sorry, Uncle. You're older than me." "I don't think so, Uncle." "Shut up." "Sorry, Uncle. You little." It almost seemed like Cersei was trying to get Endrick mad on purpose, and yet her eyes remained clueless. "You know what? Forget it. Maybe we could crash into a sun and die, so I can finally be rid of that godforsaken title," Endrick grumbled as he programmed the coordinates for the next location. "You know, you two really suit each other," Rhea chipped in from behind. "Go fuck yourself, Rhea," Endrick yelled from the pilot seat. "No, really, think about it." "Shut up." I could become a godfather." "No, Gustav could become an uncle." "You're insane." Rhea kept jabbering away nonstop, and Endrick felt like death would be a very good relief at this moment. "Why did I pick these 2? He questioned his choices while shaking his head. "I hope we don't have to visit all 4. They jumped to hyperspace once more, speeding toward the next destination. As the stars streaked by outside the window, Endrick couldn't help but think about their mission. He knew that finding the sword was crucial, not just for Gustav, but for the fate of the universe itself. The second location took them to a desolate system on the edge of a black hole. The gravitational pull was intense, warping space around them as they approached. "Whoever thought hiding a sword next to a black hole was a good idea deserves a punch," Rhea grumbled. Endrick carefully navigated the ship around the black hole's edge. "Stay focused. We've dealt with black holes before, and this won't be any different. Cersei, keep an eye on the scanners. If there's anything here, We'll need to be quick. They circled the black hole, scanning the surrounding debris fields for any signs of the sword. The environment was dangerous, with massive chunks of rock and ice orbiting perilously close to the event horizon. But despite their careful search, they found nothing. "Another dead end," Endrick voiced with a frustrated sigh. Chapter 1607 Identical Locations. Chapter 1607 Identical Locations. Author's note. Unedited chapter, Another Dead End. Endrick voiced with a frustrated sigh as they finally broke away from the black hole. As Endrick skillfully piloted the ship around the gaping maw of the black hole, his attention was caught by a faint flickering in the distance. Just beyond the swirling gravitational chaos, he spotted a teal-hued planet. It wasn't static, nor was it consistent. It flickered in and out of existence like a mirage at the edge of his vision. "Hold up!" Endrick squinted through the viewport. He tapped a few buttons, magnifying the image, then called out, "Hey, you two, look at this. Do you see that?" Both Rhea and Circe leaned over his shoulders, staring intently into the viewport. At first, the dark void of space revealed nothing unusual. But then, as if on cue, the teal planet shimmered back into view, hanging in space for a few moments before fading away again. "Did you see it?" Endrick asked, glancing between them with a spark of excitement and concern. Rhea's eyes narrowed. "Yeah, I caught it." "That's no ordinary flicker. Planets don't just phase like that," Circe chipped in. Circe's expression was a mix of fascination and unease. "It looks like the first planet we checked out, doesn't it? The color, the haziness, everything." Endrick nodded, gripping the controls. "It's weird, but in bringing us in closer. Hang tight." He eased the ship forward, carefully navigating past the intense gravitational forces. The black hole seemed to reach out, tugging at their vessel with an unrelenting grip. But Endrick maintained a steady course, pushing back with his telekinetic energy as they headed towards the flickering teal world. With every second, the planet became more real, until finally they crossed some unseen threshold and emerged in the planet's atmosphere. The shimmering faded, and the planet solidified, no longer vanishing in and out of existence. The ship touched down with a soft thud, its engines powered down as Endrick, Rhea, and Circe prepared to disembark. "All right, keep your guard up," Endrick warned, his voice low and tense. "This place, it looks exactly like the first planet, and that's not a good sign." They exited the ship, stepping onto the surface. The surroundings were almost haunting in their familiarity. Pointed rocks rose from the ground, casting long shadows under the teal sky. A pale mist clung to the ground, curling around their legs and filling the air with an unsettling chill. Circe glanced around with a wary gaze. "This place, it's identical to the first planet. Same rock formations, same mist, even the light feels the same. It's almost like we're back there." Rhea nodded while scanning the horizon. "I don't like this. It feels like a trick. But we're here now, so let's see what we can find." They split up, moving cautiously through the mist-covered terrain. Every detail seemed eerily familiar, down to the smallest crack in the rocks. They checked each crevice, examined every shadow, searching for any sign of the massive chunk of planet or the sword that Gustav needed. But no matter how thoroughly they searched, they found nothing. It was as if the planet were a hollow shell, an illusion designed to mislead them. Endrick kicked a rock and watched it skid across the ground. "This isn't right. We're going in circles, and there's nothing here." Circe's voice came through their communicators. "Uncle, Rhea, I just checked the northern ridge. It's clear. No signs of anything out of the ordinary." "Same here," Rhea replied, glancing around with a frown. "It's like we're on a ghost planet. This has to be some kind of trap, right?" Endrick sighed while rubbing his temples. "I don't know. There's got to be something we're missing here. Let's give it one more sweep, and if we still don't find anything, we'll regroup and head back to the ship." With heavy hearts and wary eyes, they resumed their search, but the result was the same. No matter how meticulously they combed the landscape, the planet remained barren, devoid of anything that could lead them to Gustav's sword. After another hour of fruitless searching, they returned to the ship, feeling a mixture of frustration and unease. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Gustav was piloting his own vessel, making his way to the next vestige. The gravitational field around him was thick, and the space itself seemed to shimmer, warping in strange patterns as he approached his destination. Just as he was preparing to enter a new galaxy, a flashing light on his control panel signaled an incoming alert. Ahead of him, a series of ships formed a perimeter in space. These were no ordinary vessels. They bore the emblem of the Universal Alliance, an interplanetary coalition led by some of the most powerful worlds, including Earth. This was the same alliance Gustav had a scuffle with in the past. As he approached, one of the ships hailed him, the signal crackling to life on his console. Gustav clicked the communicator, and a gruff voice filled the cockpit. "This is Universal Alliance, Checkpoint Bravo 17. Halt your approach and prepare for inspection." Gustav rolled his eyes while muttering, "Such unnecessary delay." Nevertheless, he complied, slowing the ship to a stop as two Alliance vessels moved alongside him. A screen blinked on, displaying a tall, burly Alliance Corp officer with a bald, scaly head and a scar running down his cheek. His expression was one of forced professionalism, but there was a glint in his eyes that suggested he knew exactly who he was addressing. "Gustav Crimson," the officer voiced with a clipped tone. "We'll be conducting a routine inspection of your vessel. Stand by." "No problem. Anything to keep the galaxy safe. Right asterisk," Gustav replied with dry amusement. The officer's lips tightened, but he said nothing, gesturing to a subordinate to begin the scan. Gustav watched as a bright light washed over his ship, scanning every inch of the vessel's exterior. After a few moments, the officer's face reappeared on the screen. "You're clear, but I advise against flying through restricted regions without checking in at designated checkpoints. You may be a well-known figure, but that doesn't exempt you from Alliance regulations." Gustav smirked while crossing his arms. "Noted. So, what's got the Alliance so riled up? Seems like you're running a pretty tight operation out here." The officer's eyes narrowed slightly. "We're on the lookout for a fugitive. A high-priority target. That's all you need to know." "A high-priority target, huh? Must be serious if it's got you all out here, patrolling the middle of nowhere." The officer's face hardened. "Your cooperation is appreciated, Mr. Crimson. We don't need your commentary." Gustav raised his hands in mock surrender. "You never know what could help. I've got places to be anyway. You're good to let me through now, right?" Gustav was being humble, even though he knew none of them could stop him if he wanted to leave. The officer hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine. You're clear. Just remember to be on your best behavior, Mr. Crimson. You might be powerful, but we're still the protectors of the cosmos." As the screen blinked off, Gustav smirked. He fired up the engines, pulling away from the checkpoint with accelerating speed. The gravitational forces resumed, pressing down on the spacecraft as it drew closer and closer to the next vestige. But his thoughts lingered on the interaction with the Alliance. The fugitive they mentioned had seemed unimportant in the moment, but the description he had overheard was automatically stored in his mind. It was impossible for him to forget anything after all. Back in their own ship, Endrick, Rhea, and Circe regrouped, silently processing the strange experience on the flickering planet. "This has to be some sort of trick," Rhea voiced in confusion. "The fact that we found two planets with identical environments can't be a coincidence." It was one thing to both have teal looks, but it was something else entirely to have a completely identical ecosystem and environment. Endrick leaned back in his seat, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Could Nocturnus be behind this? I find it difficult to understand, since his powers doesn't have enough potency to create a whole world in this plane. Circe looked between them. Maybe it's a delay tactic from someone else. If someone knows we're looking for the sword, keeping us here could buy them time to move it. Endrick's expression darkened as he considered her words. You might be right. If this is a fluke, we need to rescan. Rhea nodded. Agreed. If this place is a decoy, let's not stick around any longer than we have to. As they prepared the ship for departure, a sense of urgency settled over them. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. If someone was playing tricks here, they needed to isolate the fake from the real as soon as they could and figure out exactly what was going on. Chapter 1608 Alliance Fugitive. Chapter 1608 Alliance Fugitive. Author's note. Unedited chapters. Gustav hovered in deep space as the vast emptiness stretched out endlessly around him, broken only by the faint glimmer of stars. He had reached the next vestige of his power, nestled delicately between two large, icy moons orbiting a distant planet. The vestige pulsed, faintly casting a mythical glow that illuminated the dark surroundings, calling to him with the same sense of familiarity as the others. Without hesitation, he extended his hand, letting the energy of the vestige flow toward him. The force was overwhelming, flooding his being as it merged with him. This particular vestige brought yet another sliver of his original strength. A mere 2%, but it was significant enough to make him feel a surge of power unlike anything he had experienced since reclaiming his fragments. His body pulsed with newfound strength, and he felt yet another of his outworldly abilities unlock within him. After testing the effects of the boost briefly, Gustav turned and flew back to his spacecraft. He still had 5 more he needed to retrieve. He entered the ship, settling back into the cockpit as he set a course back on his path through space. But just as he turned the ship around, his senses caught onto something attaching itself to the ship. The ship's sensors didn't go off, but his senses were too astute for anything to occur without his notice. "What the? Something's attached to the ship," he muttered, glancing over the control panel as he searched for the source. But before he could investigate further, the flashing lights on his communicator signaled an incoming transmission. His screen lit up with the familiar insignia of the Universal Alliance, and in the next instant, the ship's speakers filled with a sharp, gruff voice. "This is Checkpoint Bravo 17 of the Universal Alliance. Halt your ship immediately and prepare for inspection." Gustav let out an irritated sigh. Again. Nevertheless, he slowed his ship and waited for the Alliance officers to close in. As before, 2 of their imposing vessels flanked his spacecraft. The same officer from earlier, the tall, scarred man with a stern expression and a hint of something personal in his gaze, appeared on the screen. "Mr. Crimson, we're conducting another search," the officer announced with a curt tone. Gustav raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "Another search? What a coincidence. I was just thinking of you, officer." The officer's eyes narrowed, clearly unimpressed by Gustav's sarcasm. "Well, be quick about this, Mr. Crimson." Gustav gave a mock sigh, glancing at the scanner display before him. "You know, you might want to start your search at the southern part of the ship's hull. I've got a feeling you'll find something interesting there." The officer frowned, giving Gustav a skeptical look before signaling his subordinates. A few moments later, one of the Alliance officers hovered close to the southern edge of the ship, carefully scanning the surface. Suddenly, a figure cloaked in a shimmering, camouflaged layer began to materialize, clinging to the hull. "There!" one of the officers shouted as the figure's camouflage faded, revealing a thin, wiry man with sharp features and a wild look in his eyes. Before anyone could react, the fugitive sprang forward, shoving one of the officers back with a powerful kick and darting into the open void of space. "Stop him!" the officer in command shouted, lunging forward as he aimed a glowing weapon. But the fugitive moved with astonishing speed, warping space around him as he vanished from sight, leaving only a faint ripple in his wake. The officer turned back toward Gustav in anguish. "Mr. Crimson, you're coming with us for harboring a fugitive." Gustav let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "Harboring? You're not serious, are you? That guy was clinging to the outside of my ship. If I were harboring him, don't you think he'd be, inside?" The officer's face darkened as he spoke with irritation. "Your smart remarks won't save you, Crimson. You're coming with us for questioning, one way or another." Gustav crossed his arms, giving the officer an unimpressed look. "I'd rather not waste my time with that. Stay out of my way if you know what's good for you." Without waiting for a response, Gustav's form shimmered, and in an instant he vanished from the cockpit, reappearing millions of feet away from his ship. He darted through space at unfathomable speed, closing in on the fleeing fugitive. Ahead of him, he could see the fugitive's silhouette, nothing more than a tiny, distant shape moving at incredible speed. Gustav narrowed his eyes, extending his arm as he channeled his energy, focusing his vision on the figure racing through the stars. "You're not getting away that easily," he murmured while clenching his fist. In the blink of an eye, he accelerated. Closing his fist made space fold around him, making him cross vast distances in a heartbeat. The fugitive was moving fast, but Gustav was faster, and within seconds he closed the gap, appearing directly behind the man. The fugitive barely had time to react before Gustav's hand shot out, grabbing him by the neck in a vice-like grip. The fugitive gasped, struggling in Gustav's hold, his limbs flailing as he tried to break free. Gustav held him effortlessly with a cold gaze as he tightened his grip, just enough to subdue him. "Going somewhere?" Gustav questioned with a smirk. The fugitive's eyes widened in fear, his voice coming out in a strangled gasp. "Let me go. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Gustav raised an eyebrow as his smirk widened. "Oh, I think I have a pretty good idea. But I'm curious, why hitch a ride on my ship? Seems like a dangerous game for someone so desperate to stay hidden." The fugitive's eyes flickered with panic, but he said nothing. His body tensed as he continued to struggle. Gustav gave him a slight shake, bringing him face to face. "Come on now. Don't make me work for it. Why were you hiding on my ship?" The fugitive swallowed hard as his face contorted in fear and defiance. "They'll kill me if I go back. I had no choice. I thought you could help." "Help? Now that's funny. I don't make it a habit of helping stowaways, especially ones with bounty hunters on their tails," Gustav replied coolly, his grip unyielding. "But since you're here, maybe you can answer a few questions. Like, what exactly did you do to get the entire Alliance out here looking for you?" The fugitive's expression hardened, and for a moment, Gustav thought he might get an answer. But before the man could speak, a familiar, harsh voice cut through the void. "Mr. Crimson, release the fugitive immediately. This is your last warning." Gustav rolled his eyes as he spotted the Alliance spacecraft closing in on their location. "I've got him under control, officer. But if you want him so badly, come and get him." The Alliance ships closed in rapidly and made a stop not too distant from their position. "Mr. Crimson, you're in violation of Alliance protocol. Release the fugitive and stand down, or we'll use force." Gustav glanced back at the approaching ships with an unamused expression. "You really don't know when to quit, do you? Fine, have it your way." With a flick of his wrist, he loosened his grip on the fugitive just enough to give the man a brief moment of freedom. The fugitive hesitated, glancing between Gustav and the Alliance ships with a desperate expression. Gustav looked at him briefly before speaking with an icy tone. "Run all you want, but if you make trouble for me next time, I won't be as generous." Without waiting for a response, Gustav released the fugitive, watching as he shot off into the distance, vanishing into the void once more. He turned to face the Alliance ships with his arms crossed as he waited for their next move. The officer's face displayed a look of annoyance as he leapt out of the spacecraft. "You let him go!" "Release the fugitive and stand down. Weren't those your words?" Gustav questioned while raising a brow. How could why? Now he's gone. The officer was speechless. "You sound like you don't know what you want." Gustav remained unbothered by the current situation. The officer growled in response. "Mr. Crimson, I suggest you return to your ship and prepare for questioning. You have aided and abetted a fugitive today." Gustav raised an eyebrow and replied with a calm voice edged with irritation. "If you think I'm going to waste my time answering your questions, you're sorely mistaken. I have more important things to do than babysit your fugitive. So unless you have something useful to say, I suggest you move along." The officer's face turned red with anger. But before he could respond, Gustav's form shimmered, and in an instant he vanished, reappearing in his ship's cockpit as he activated the engines. "I dare you to stop me." Chapter 1609 Same Occurrence. Chapter 1609 Same Occurrence, author's note. Unedited chapter with a final, dismissive glance at the Alliance ships, he set his course for his next destination, leaving the frustrated officers and their elusive fugitive far behind. "I dare you to stop me!" Gustav's voice echoed from the ship, transmitting it to the Alliance comms as he sped off. Gustav's ship cut through the darkness, leaving the Alliance checkpoint and their chaos behind. He had more important matters to attend to, and he wasn't about to let a minor distraction derail his mission. The expanse of space lay quiet as Endrick, Rhea, and Circe drifted through the stars. Their ship seemed like a lone traveler in the vast, cosmic sea. The interior of the vessel groaned softly. The interior dimmed lights further allowed the illumination of the constant glow of data screens to surround them. A week had passed since they departed from the flickering teal planet. Their destination now was the third possible location that matched the features Gustav had seen in his brief vision. Endrick leaned over the control panel, scanning the incoming data with a focused gaze. He had been tense since the second planet, its eerie similarity to the first unnerving him. A creeping suspicion had started to take root in his mind, one he couldn't shake, despite Rhea's and Circe's attempts to lighten the mood. "I don't know, Endrick," Circe said, reclining in her seat with an amused smile as she twirled a strand of her silvery hair between her fingers. "Maybe it's just a coincidence. It's a big universe, after all. Planets looking alike? Happens all the time, right?" Rhea chuckled from the other side, tilting his head to look at Endrick with a casual, mischievous grin. "Exactly. Who's to say we haven't just stumbled on some intergalactic copy-paste system? I mean, it would save on decoration costs." But Endrick barely glanced at them, his expression tense. Two identical planets in the same quadrant with no real differences? No, that's not a coincidence. Something's off. I don't like it. Circe still tried to maintain her light-hearted tone. "Come on, Uncle. You can't take everything so seriously. We're on a wild hunt for a sword across a galaxy. Can't we at least laugh a bit on the way?" Endrick gave her a sidelong look, unable to fully hide a smirk. "I'll laugh when we've got the sword in our hands and Gustav has what he needs to regain his power. Until then, stay sharp." Rhea stretched, placing his hands behind his head with a casual sigh. 2 days out from the next mystery planet. Until then, it'll just be here, kicking back and waiting for the next round of déjà vu. With a weary shake of his head, Endrick turned back to the panel, checking their progress. They were indeed 2 days from their destination, and he intended to use every moment wisely. For now, he was focused on keeping track of the energy signature head scanned from the second planet. He wanted to see if it repeated on the third planet or if there was any deviation. Meanwhile, Cersei decided to make her way to one of the quieter rooms of the ship. She knew that, of the three, she was the least experienced. Her abilities lagged behind Rhys and Endrix. She sat cross-legged on the floor, closing her eyes as she began to channel her frost-related bloodline. Cold energy seeped from her palms, gathering in a faint mist around her, forming small, delicate snowflakes that drifted down. "I need to be stronger," she whispered to herself, focusing intently as she continued to train. She didn't want to be a liability in this mission. She wanted to be useful. 2 days later, the ship emerged from hyperspace as the coordinates of the third location lit up on their map. Outside, the vastness of the new system stretched out before them, and as they approached the designated planet, Endric's heart sank. It was identical to the first 2 planets. The teal-hued atmosphere gave the world a surreal glow, and the pointy rock formations that rose from the surface looked all too familiar. The pale mist that clung to the ground gave the landscape an eerie stillness, and Endric couldn't shake the creeping sense of dread that had haunted him since the beginning. "Well, here we go again," Rhea muttered in resignation. "Same place, same strange feeling. Want to place any bets on finding nothing here, too?" Endric ignored him, pulling up his scanner as he began to analyze the energy signature of this third planet. He compared it to the reading he'd taken on the second planet, and though it was similar, there was a subtle variance, a faint difference that added another layer of mystery. "There's a slight shift in the energy signature here," he voiced while frowning. "It's not much, but it's there. We're not dealing with identical planets, just similar ones." Cersei, standing by the viewport, looked out at the landscape with a frown. "Maybe we're on the right track, then. If there's a difference, it could mean we're getting closer to something real." Endric nodded, though he didn't let himself feel hopeful just yet. "Let's search the area, same as before. Be thorough. We're looking for any signs of the sword or anything out of place." They disembarked, stepping into the unsettlingly familiar landscape. The air was thick with an unnatural chill, and the rocks and jagged formations cast long shadows across the ground. They spread out, each scanning their assigned area cautiously. Hours passed, and once again they found nothing. But just as they were preparing to regroup, Cersei's voice crackled over the comms. "Endric, Rhea, there's someone here." Her tone was laced with strain, as if she were struggling. In the background, a loud explosion rang out, echoing across the empty landscape. "Cersei, what's your location?" Rhea asked. "Southern Ridge, just hurry." Her voice broke off as another boom echoed over the comms. Without hesitation, Endric blinked, disappearing from his spot and reappearing at the southern ridge in an instant. He arrived just in time to see Cersei's body hurtling through the air. Her figure was illuminated by the faint teal light as she flew back, disoriented. Endric rushed forward, catching her mid-flight before she hit the ground. "I've got you," he voiced while lowering her gently. Cersei coughed, clutching her ribs as she struggled to speak. Two figures, dark robes. They came out of nowhere. Endric looked up, his gaze narrowing as he spotted 2 shadowed figures in dark robes, their faces obscured. The figures turned, glancing briefly at him before they started to flee, vanishing into the mist as they moved with inhuman speed. "You're not going anywhere," Endric growled while handing Cersei off to Rhea, who had just arrived. Rhea took Cersei's arm as his casual expression got replaced with a steely look. "I'll look after Cersei." Endric nodded as he locked onto the fleeing figures. He vanished from his spot in a blink, reappearing directly in the path of the 2 robed figures as they hurtled through the mist. He raised a hand, and a telekinetic barrier of pure energy sprang up before them, blocking their path. The 2 figures halted abruptly, and for the first time, Endric could make out their faces, or rather, the lack thereof. Their features were hidden in shadows, as if they were wrapped in a dark veil, and their eyes glowed faintly with a sinister, otherworldly light. "What are you doing here?" Endrick demanded with a low and unyielding voice. The figures exchanged a glance. Then one of them laughed. Their voice emitted a chilling hollow sound that sent a shiver down his spine. "We are here to protect what you seek. Time Candidate." One of them voiced carried on like a whisper in the wind. Endrick's eyes narrowed. "Protect? So you know about the sword. Where is it?" The second figure tilted his head. "It is beyond your reach, child of time. Turn back, lest you meet the fate of those who came before you." Endrick felt his patience snap. "I'm afraid I can't do that." "You will tell me where the sword is." He raised his hand, while silvery blue energy glowed in his eyes. "I'll take the information by force if I have to." The two figures merely smirked as their forms started to flicker like phantoms. "Try if you dare, but know that your meddling here is but a pebble cast into an ocean. The ripples will drown you, Time Candidate." Without waiting, Endrick surged forward, reaching for the nearest figure with a swift motion. But as his hand connected, the figure's form dissolved into mist, dispersing into the air with a haunting laugh. The second figure did the same, vanishing into thin air before he could react. Left standing alone in the mist, Endrick clenched his fists. How the hell did they get away? Endrick thought he had them cornered, but he could no longer sense their presence. Whoever they were, these figures had knowledge of the sword and the power to evade him with ease, but their words lingered in his mind. It was obvious they knew something. "Endrick," Ria's voice came over the comms. "Cersei, all right. She's a bit banged up, but nothing serious. Did you get them? You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.